The fateful morning. The story opens with a beautiful cinematic shot of a car driving through a quiet, tree-lined street. A subtle, emotional soundtrack begins to play. A question appears on screen. What if the love of your life raised a child of yours in silence, without blame, without seeking you out, just moving forward, alone? And years later, fate puts you face to face with a reflection of what you lost, in the eyes of a child who has your face and has never heard your name. This is that story, and it begins the day Lucas drove his son to school. He just didn't know that on that day, everything would change. Before we dive into the story, do you believe that a single moment can change your entire life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. The morning was clear, too quiet for a Monday. The sun wasn't yet strong, but the city was already bustling at a pace Lucas hadn't followed in months. Ever since Claire's passing, he had limited himself to the essentials, sleeping little, eating minimally, and working as much as possible. Everything else, social life, emotions, presence, he had put off until later. Or perhaps forever. But today, his driver, David, couldn't make it. A fever, a simple illness, something minor, but enough to put Lucas behind the wheel, with Leo in the back seat, his backpack on, and a slight smile on his face at the prospect of his father being there. "You haven't come with me in a long time," the boy said, giving him a sideways glance while playing with his shoelaces. Lucas nodded, without taking his eyes off the road. "Yes, a long time. Are you just going to drop me off at the door, or are you going to walk me to the classroom?" "To the classroom," he replied without thinking. Then he wondered why he had said that. Maybe he just wanted to see where his son spent a good part of his days. Maybe he wanted to breathe in an atmosphere that wasn't stifled by silence and memories. Or maybe, and he would never have the courage to admit this, he was tired of pretending that everything was under control. He parked, got out of the car, and waited for Leo to get his backpack sorted. The boy walked with a lightness that Lucas envied. The way he smiled at other children, how he greeted the guards, everything about him was light. And that hurt, because deep down, Lucas knew he couldn't give even half of that back. The school hallway was colorful and quiet, the sounds muffled by walls covered with children's drawings and school notices. The smell of chalk and tempera paint brought back memories he didn't know he had. "This is it," Leo said, stopping in front of a door decorated with animal figures and colored letters. Lucas smiled slightly and held the doorknob. When he opened it, time stopped. She was there. Maria. Her back was to him, her hair in a simple bun, writing something on the blackboard. Her handwriting was familiar, beautiful, and firm, and the feeling was immediate. Lucas's entire body tensed. His heart thumped as if it hadn't in years. And for a second, he thought it was a cruel coincidence. But then she turned around, and the world fell into a silence that hurt his ears. Her eyes, the same eyes, found him as if they knew exactly where he would be. Except, they weren't ready for what they saw. The marker fell from her hand without a sound, and her mouth fell slightly open, as if she were trying to form a word that wouldn't come out. Lucas stood in the doorway. He wanted to say something. Anything. But everything in him was frozen. Maria didn't move. She just looked at him, with an expression that mixed surprise, contained pain, and a strength he recognized. The strength of someone who has learned to keep going even when all they want is to stop. The time between them was broken by Leo. "Teacher Maria," he said, running toward her and hugging her around the waist. She looked down. She knelt slowly and returned the hug with a fragile smile. "Hello, my love. Good morning." Lucas felt something break inside. An invisible but loud noise. The tone of her voice. The way she called his son, my love. It hit him harder than he wanted to admit. "This is my dad," Leo said, pointing back, oblivious to the tension in the air. "He came with me today because David got sick." She stood up slowly. She didn't take her eyes off him. "Lucas," she said at last, with a thread of a voice. He nodded, his throat dry, his hands cold. "Maria." She took a deep breath. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. "How long has it been?" "Years," he replied. Leo looked at the two of them, then refocused on his backpack. "Teacher Maria is the best teacher ever," he said, with the lightness of a child who doesn't feel the chasms between adults. "She understands me without me having to talk." Lucas looked at her again, and he saw it. In her eyes, in her face, in her chest, rising and falling slowly. She felt everything. Everything he felt, too. The past alive, the present confusing, and a question that floated between them, but that neither dared to say aloud. Maria turned back to the blackboard. She tried to resume her interrupted gesture. Lucas wanted to say he was surprised, that he hadn't known, that it was good to see her. But no sentence felt right. Everything sounded too small compared to what was right there. The bell rang. Children ran in, laughing, bringing too much life into that space that, seconds before, seemed frozen in time. Maria stepped away from Leo and looked at Lucas one last time. "It was good to see you." And then she turned back. Lucas stood still. Children passed him. A little girl tripped over his leg and apologized. He didn't respond. He just looked at the spot where she had been. The trace of her perfume. The tone of her voice. The absence of an explanation. Everything was mixed up in his chest. He left the classroom without remembering if he had said goodbye to Leo. He walked down the hallway like someone trying to wake up from a dream he didn't want to remember, but couldn't forget. Outside, the world was the same. But inside, Lucas knew it. He had entered that school to drop off his son. But he left with the past burning in his hands. What do you think will happen next? Will Lucas go back to the school to get answers? What do you think Maria's secret is? Share your predictions in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more. Part 2. The Face in the Mirror. The scene shifts to Lucas's apartment, dark and quiet. He is pacing, restless. The emotional soundtrack from the first part returns, more intense this time. Lucas didn't sleep that night. Not because of insomnia, but because of an excess of memories. Maria's face, the way she avoided touching him with words. Her gaze, so firm and at the same time pleading for distance. Everything pulsed inside him. Everything brought up a question he didn't dare to ask aloud. What if it wasn't just about her? Have you ever felt like a single question could change your entire life? Tell me about it in the comments. And if you're enjoying the story, remember to like and subscribe. The next morning, even though David had recovered, Lucas insisted on taking Leo to school. He said he had enjoyed their time together. Was he lying? Or maybe it wasn't a complete lie. There was something about that school that attracted him, and he couldn't decide if it was curiosity, guilt, or something deeper, murkier, and sadder. In the back seat, Leo chattered about drawings, games, and new friends. Lucas listened to bits and pieces, but enough to understand that there was someone special there. A friend. "Yesterday, Alex lent me his pencil case," the boy said, pulling his lunchbox out of his backpack. "And he helped me finish the block castle. He's good at that. Everyone likes Alex." The name resonated strangely. Familiar. Alex. Lucas just responded with a sound of approval as he parked. The school was in full swing, with hurried mothers, running. Children, and teachers smiling with visible fatigue in their eyes. He walked with Leo to the colorful hallway, but something felt different. As if there was a background noise to everything. As if there was an emotional frequency that only he could hear. Maria was not at the classroom door. He noticed it immediately. Maybe she was running late. Maybe she was avoiding him. He knelt to kiss his son on the forehead and say goodbye. That's when he heard running footsteps. "Mom!" The word hit him like a punch in the stomach. A small boy, perhaps Leo's age, came running down the hallway towards a figure who had just appeared through the classroom door. It was her, Maria. She knelt to receive the boy's hug, and for an instant, everything around him disappeared. It was just the two of them. The gesture was natural, familiar, ancient. And then the boy turned. It was just a second. But it was enough. Lucas felt his entire body freeze. It was as if he were looking into a strange mirror. Not a mirror of the present, but of many years ago. That face was not unfamiliar. Blue eyes, intense, just like his. Dark hair, fair skin, a strong jawline, an arrogant look, as if the world had always been his. The boy smiled and walked straight to Lucas without hesitation. "You're Leo's dad, right?" Lucas blinked, his throat dry. He nodded slowly. "My mom says he's my soul brother." The phrase came out lightly, as if it carried no weight. But Lucas felt the ground disappear. Maria was standing behind, her face pale, her eyes fixed on him. There was a plea for silence in them, but also a subtle desperation, a panic that only someone who guards a secret too big can feel. "And you are?" he managed to say, swallowing hard. "Alex, my name is Alex." He smiled, like someone who doesn't understand the earthquake he just caused. Lucas tried to smile back. He couldn't. He just nodded, feeling his stomach churn. Maria approached, took the boy by the hand, and looked directly into his eyes. "Come on, Alex. Class is about to start." "Okay," the boy replied, still looking curiously at Lucas. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him, as if pleading for understanding. "Control. Time." Lucas stood there. What? The hallway spun. He didn't know what to do with that. Alex. The name now had a shape. Voice. Eyes. Face. And that face. It was his. It was as if the past had created a replica and thrown it back in front of his eyes. He left there like someone fleeing a fire. He got into the car, closed the doors, and took a deep breath. But he couldn't. The air wouldn't come. He took out his cell phone. He looked for some explanation. He wanted to call someone. The lawyer. His brother. God. Anyone who could look at him and say, "No, Lucas, you're imagining things." But the image was too vivid to be an illusion. On his phone screen, he opened the photo gallery. He scrolled through old pictures, from when he was younger, from when Claire was still alive, from when Leo was a baby. And then he stopped at a forgotten image, a selfie, taken years ago, still with Maria. They were laughing, their faces close, and there he saw what he hadn't wanted to see before. The eyes. Those eyes. He closed the gallery. He dropped the phone on the seat and rested his elbows on the steering wheel. Alex. The name resonated like a drum beating slowly in his chest. If that was true, and everything in him said it was, then someone had hidden an entire life from him. A life with his face. He returned to work like someone walking on broken glass. He spoke with employees, signed documents, but everything seemed to have no sound, as if the world was in the background and only the image of Alex was in focus. That night, Leo was having dinner while telling stories about school. The teacher said there's going to be a presentation next week. I want to be the narrator. Alex is going to be the dragon. He loves being the villain. Lucas smiled. Forced. You like him, right? Yeah, He's my real friend. We like the same things, and I don't know. It feels like we already knew each other before." Lucas looked away. That squeezed him inside. Hard. And yes, in a way, they already knew each other. By blood. The night was long. Lucas couldn't get away from the mirror. He looked at himself with strange eyes. He tried to remember. He tried to put the pieces together. How many months after the end were they separated? How many days between the last kiss and the absence? Was it possible? Everything said yes. And the way Maria looked at him wasn't that of someone surprised by his doubt. It was that of someone who feared his question. Lucas knew he couldn't run to her, that he couldn't demand anything. But inside him, something couldn't be contained anymore. The image of Alex. The simple phrase, "My mom says he's my soul brother." That stuck to his skin. He didn't sleep. Again. And at dawn, all he wanted was to see that boy again. With his own eyes. Because now, he needed to know. If that reflection that walked, talked, and smiled was just a coincidence of a face, or a secret that had lived for too long in the darkness, the truth is about to be revealed, and it will change everything. Don't miss the next part of this emotional story. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know what happens next. The scene opens on Lucas's empty home. He walks through the silent rooms, looking at the familiar objects as if for the first time. The soundtrack is quiet and reflective. The camera lingers on a photo of his late wife, Claire. Lucas returned home like a man carrying a name that he never knew was his. It was too late to simply go on as if nothing had happened. Alex had a face, a voice, a story, and everything about him screamed something the world had never told him. That night was the most silent of all. What would you do if you discovered you had a secret child you never knew about? Let me know in the comments below. That night was the most silent of all. Even Leo didn't talk much. He seemed to sense that his father was distant, not in body, but in his gaze. Lucas sat on the living room sofa, turned off the TV, shut off the lights, and just held his phone. He opened his photo gallery and scrolled all the way to the bottom. He rummaged through the years as if searching for oxygen underwater. There she was, Maria, smiling on a park bench with an ice cream cone that was beginning to melt. Her eyes shone in a way he had never seen again in anyone, not even in Claire. Another image, the two of them sitting in a restaurant in Valencia. Her head was resting on his shoulder. Her eyes were closed. He had that half smile of someone who believes love is going to last. That love is enough. But what hurt the most was the date. 2 months before everything changed. 2 months before he made the decision that caused him to lose everything without even realizing it. Lucas dropped his phone onto his chest and closed his eyes. It was impossible not to remember that day. The call from Emily. Her voice was too calm. Her words were measured with surgical precision. "I'm pregnant, Lucas." Silence. He remembered the bitter taste that rose in his throat. The shock. The panic. But also the obligation to do the right thing. Or what he thought was right. Emily was his fiancée. And although their relationship wasn't one of passion, there was respect. There was history. Families were involved. Expectations. And now, a life. That same week, he walked away from Maria. Without explanations. He simply disappeared. He didn't have the courage to look her in the eye. He didn't have the courage to tell her that the love they were building was going to be buried by a duty from the past. Lucas got up from the sofa as if fleeing his own body. He went to the desk drawer, rummaged through it for a few minutes until he found a small wooden box. He opened it carefully. Inside, there were letters, written by Maria's hand. They didn't say, "I love you," in so many words, but they said it in every line, in every simple sentence, in every part where she wrote, "I thought of you when I saw a man reading Bukowski on the subway," or, "This song reminded me of you. I don't know why." At the bottom of the box, there was a photo. He had his arm around her shoulders. Both of them were lying on the grass, laughing about something silly. Her face was half turned, but the smile was the same as Alex's. The revelation fell like an avalanche. He never knew. Maria never told him. And now, all he had was the echo of what could have been. Lucas spent the entire night in silence, sitting on the floor, looking at that picture. And at some point, he whispered, "What if I had chosen you?" The question hung in the air. No one answered. But inside him, the answer came with a bitter taste. He didn't choose her, and in the process, he lost the love of his life. And perhaps, a son. The next day, he didn't take Leo to school. He didn't want to see anyone. He canceled meetings, turned off his phone. He didn't want questions. He just wanted to understand how everything had slipped through his fingers. He went back to an old email folder and searched for messages from Maria. He found one, from 4 days before the conversation with Emily. She had written, "I feel like something's wrong. You're quieter, more distant. I'd like to know what's going on. If it's something else, if it's someone, just tell me. Just don't disappear." He disappeared. She had warned him. She had tried. And now, the absence was charging interest. Lucas closed the computer and looked at himself in the hallway mirror. His hair was grayer. His eyes were more hollow. His skin was wearier. He was a successful man, a widower, a father, respected, but deeply broken. And the worst part was, he was broken by something he himself had chosen. In his attempt to do the right thing, he might have made the biggest mistake of his life. He got in his car in the middle of the afternoon and drove aimlessly. He just wanted to drive, to forget, to breathe different air. But his thoughts pounded against the walls of his head like a runaway train. He remembered Emily, the birth of Leo, the routine of being a father, the difficult first years, the guilt, and how, even living next to his wife, he felt that a piece of his soul had been left behind the day he didn't reply to Maria's last message. Did she deserve to know? Did she deserve to be included in the decision? He asked himself that question 100 times, but the answer no longer mattered, because what hurt now was what she never said. She knew, and still, she kept silent. And that was killing him a little more. Lucas stopped the car at a secluded viewpoint, from which he could see the entire city. He turned on the radio, but nothing made sense. He opened the glove compartment and took out an old photo of a newborn Leo next to Claire. He was so small, so defenseless. And Lucas remembered what he felt holding his son for the first time. An indescribable force, a certainty that his life, from that moment on, had changed forever. And now, there was a possibility of having lived all of that a second time, without knowing it. Alex. The name now had weight. The face had weight, and Maria's silence weighed more than anything. On the way home, he stopped at a traffic light and, without knowing why, typed her name on Instagram. The profile was private. The profile picture was a child's drawing, a son and 2 figures holding hands. He clicked. He zoomed in on the image. One of the figures was taller. It had blue eyes. The other, smaller, held the hand of the taller one. Lucas felt his stomach sink. He closed his phone. He rested his forehead on the steering wheel. This was no longer a supposition. He knew, even without confirmation, even without DNA. even without words. He knew. And what's more, he knew that sooner or later, he would have to face it, because a forgotten love can go dormant. But a son, no. And that was what was about to wake up. Part 4. The Invisible Hero. The scene transitions to Lucas arriving at the school again. He stands in the background, a silent observer. The tone is tense and melancholic. That morning, Lucas put on the most neutral white shirt he could find in the closet. He buttoned it slowly. He put his watch on his left wrist, straightened his collar. He wasn't a vain man, but this trip to the school wouldn't be just another one. It was no longer for Leo. It wasn't just to drop off or pick up his son. It was to see Alex, to see Maria. At the school door, he took a deep breath before getting out of the car. The morning air seemed denser, as if it knew there was something unresolved within those colorful walls. He walked through the yard with a posture that tried to seem casual. He greeted the principal with a slight nod, smiled at an employee sweeping up dry leaves, and discreetly glanced at the classroom where Leo and Alex studied. He didn't go in. He just waited, like someone haunting a memory, afraid to face it. At dismissal, Maria appeared holding Alex's hand. Lucas stood under the shade of a nearby tree. He watched. She talked to him as if the world could stop right there, just between the two of them. Her body language was one of complete devotion, clean love, without demands, without hurry. The boy smiled, confident, secure. Lucas couldn't take his eyes off them, not even when she turned and saw him. Their gazes crossed. She stopped for a second. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked at him. Then, she looked back at Alex, picked up his backpack, and they both continued toward the exit. Lucas felt the weight of what she didn't say. He felt the silent scream behind her serenity. In the following days, he started showing up more frequently. He told Leo he wanted to be around a little more. "It's good for me to see you grow up." The boy smiled, not suspecting what was behind it. Lucas would stay in the car for a few minutes, then walk around the yard like someone in no hurry to leave. A coffee here, a conversation there. Over time, the staff began to know him by name. One of the older janitors greeted him with a certain respect. "You're Leo's dad, right?" Lucas nodded. "Yes, he's a good kid. Very good friends with Alex. They're always together." Lucas wanted to smile, but he couldn't. The janitor continued, not noticing the tension. "You know, Maria is a fighter. She raised Alex alone, since the beginning. She never wanted to say who the father was. She always found a way to change the subject. She said all that mattered was the love she gave him. And she's got plenty of that, believe me." Lucas felt the air leave his lungs for a second. Never? She didn't tell anyone. It wasn't just him she kept it from. She carried it all alone, all these years, without blaming anyone, without asking for help, without using the child as a punishment or a currency of pain. That hurt more than any accusation, because it was silence, not punishment. It was absence, not revenge. Lucas began to observe the small gestures, the way she knelt in front of the children to talk to them at eye level, the care in the details, the affection without exaggeration, the tone of her voice, firm but sweet. And when she bent down to tie Alex's shoelaces or adjust his cap, Lucas saw more than a mother. He saw a woman who made do with what she had, who didn't wait for anyone, who loved without guarantees. On Friday, something changed. Leo ran out of the classroom, smiling. Alex came right behind him. They were talking about a football game they would have on Monday. Lucas was waiting for them, sitting on a nearby bench. Alex looked at him. He stopped for an instant. "You're Leo's dad, right?" Lucas smiled slightly. "Yes, I am. He talks about you. He says you know how to build card castles better than anyone." "He exaggerates," he replied with a lighter tone. Alex smiled. "My mom knows how to build things too, but she prefers to read." Lucas felt a lump in his throat. "Your mom is amazing," he said, discreetly looking toward the spot where Maria was talking to another teacher. Alex nodded, as if confirming an absolute truth. "Yeah, she is." Lucas wanted to ask so many things, but he couldn't. Not with Leo listening. Not with Maria so close. The boy left with a small gesture. Lucas stayed there for a while longer. On his way out, as he passed by the school mural, something caught his attention. A child's drawing, stuck with tape. It was crooked, almost falling off. He walked closer. It was by Alex, signed with big, almost shaky letters. On the paper, a tall man holding hands with a smaller child. Both with their backs to the viewer, looking at a yellow sun in the corner of the page. The man had blue eyes. The boy, a huge smile. The man had no face, only a back. The caption, written in a child's handwriting, read, "This is my invisible hero." His throat closed up. His hands trembled. He just stood there. His heart was pounding so hard, it seemed to be thumping in the hallway. Maria appeared in the distance. She saw the scene. She saw him standing there. She saw the drawing. But she didn't approach. She just stood there. They looked at each other from a distance, and again, without a sound. Just that silence that screamed more than any word. Lucas looked down. He gently touched the paper without unsticking it from the mural, as if that drawing said everything she had never said, everything he had never heard, everything they had let slip away. She had created a hero with his back to her, because she never had the opportunity to see him from the front. And in that instant, Lucas understood that what separated him from Alex wasn't absence. It was time. Too much time in silence. Too much time away. Too much time without knowing what could have been. But there, in front of that crooked paper, in front of that boy he saw, and couldn't call his son, in front of a woman who still didn't look at him with eyes full of the past, he understood that no matter how much it hurt, he needed to hear it from her lips, what that silence was hiding, even if it destroyed everything, even if nothing was left, because every one of her gestures said what she never said aloud, and he could no longer stand to keep listening in silence. What do you think will happen when Lucas finally confronts Maria? How will she react? And what will he say? Share your predictions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the final parts of this emotional journey. Part 5. The Final Confession. The scene opens with a shot of Lucas standing at the classroom door. The light from the hallway shines in, illuminating tiny dust motes in the air. The sound of children's voices from inside the classroom is faint, as if from another world. Inside, she was talking to the children about planets. She used simple comparisons. She laughed. She was calm. But he felt the opposite. His hand trembled as he held the doorknob. He didn't go in. He just waited and waited until the children came out. In your opinion, does the secret Maria has been hiding all this time deserve to be forgiven? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next part. Finally, the children came out. One by one, they ran, with backpacks bigger than their bodies. Some smiled at Lucas. Leo and Alex came out last, both talking about dinosaurs. Alex looked at Lucas, giving him a shy smile. Lucas responded with a forced smile. Then she appeared. Maria. carrying a stack of papers and her bag on her shoulder, as if it were just another end of the day. But her hesitant eyes betrayed her. She knew. She knew he was there for a reason other than a casual visit. Lucas took a deep breath. He clenched his jaw. He took 2 steps. "Maria?" She stopped, her back to him. Her entire body seemed to freeze. Her hand tightened on her bag strap. She took a moment to turn around. "Is Alex my son?" The hallway seemed to shrink. Everything around him became blurry. She didn't answer. She didn't turn around. She just closed her eyes. "Do you really need to ask?" Her voice was low, but it carried an entire lifetime within it. Lucas felt his chest tighten. "Answer me, Maria." She turned slowly. Her face was thinner. Her eyes were sunken. She wasn't the woman from before, but she was. And seeing her like this hurt more than he expected. She looked at him straight on. No shouting, no drama, just the raw truth between them. "You had her, Lucas. You had a marriage. You had a son. You had a status." She paused. That pause hurt more than any word. "What did I have? I had memories, and a baby growing up alone." He tried to defend himself. "She was my fiancée. She was pregnant. I thought it was the right thing to do." "Maybe it was the right thing for you," she interrupted, her voice not rising. "But for me, it was the end." She bent down, opened her bag, and took out a small, simple wooden box. It was worn at the corners. She held it out to him. Lucas took it, not understanding. He opened it. Inside was a maternity bracelet, one of those they put on a baby right after birth. It had the name Alex, and in the father's field, a dash. Nothing. An empty space filling a space that should have been his. "I didn't look for you," she said, not out of pride, not out of revenge. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. "I understood, Lucas. I understood that you no longer belonged to me." He looked down. He held the bracelet as if holding a child for the first time, albeit years too late. "You should have told me," she laughed, a laugh without humor. A tired laugh. "Told you what? That you destroyed everything with a decision that didn't include me? That you left without saying anything? I was waiting for an explanation, Lucas, not an apology, and it never came. You left without knowing, but I stayed, knowing, feeling, seeing his face every day, and trying not to think about you." She took 2 steps toward him. "I preferred that Alex grew up far from doubts, far from the feeling of being someone's mistake." Lucas closed his eyes for a second. It hurt to hear her. "You shouldn't have carried that alone." "I carried it," she said, "because I had no choice." She fumbled in her bag. She took out a folded piece of paper. "He drew this last week. I thought you should see it." Lucas took it. He unfolded it carefully. A simple drawing. A tall male figure, with his back to the viewer, holding hands with a smaller child. The sky in the background, a big sun. Both looking at the horizon. No face, no name. Just backs. "He's been drawing like that since he was little," she said. "No name, no face, but he always knew that someone was missing." Lucas squeezed the paper in both hands. His eyes began to burn. He looked at her as if searching for something beyond the pain, something that still resisted amid the rubble. "Maria?" His voice was low and raw. "I never forgot you, not for a single day." She hesitated. Her mouth trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. She blinked several times, as if trying to keep control. But she couldn't. 2 tears escaped. Silent. "Me too." Her voice was broken. "I never forgot you either." Lucas took a step forward, but he stopped. She didn't move either. Neither of them touched. The hallway was empty. The school was almost silent. But between them, there was an invisible noise, an energy that wouldn't dissipate. Time, for an instant, seemed suspended. They stood there, face to face, between what they were and what they failed to become. What was there wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was recognition. It was love that had survived the absence. Lucas wanted to say more, but there was nothing that would fit in that moment. No promises, no explanations, only the weight of what was lost, and the certainty that she never stopped feeling. Lucas knows the truth, but can he fix everything? In your opinion, what should Lucas's next step be? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the final part of this story. Part 6. The Path to Reconnection. The scene begins with Lucas returning home, a heavy weight on his shoulders. He walks through the silent house, every object now feeling different. The pain is no longer anger, but a profound emptiness that needs to be filled. That night, Lucas did not return home whole. He returned like a man with a fragment of his heart pierced in his chest, trying to walk without cutting himself from the inside out. He slept little. Most of the time he lay with his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, feeling hollow inside. He didn't know what to do next, only that he couldn't go back. What do you think Lucas's next move should be to mend the hearts of Maria and his son? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the following days, everything seemed calm on the surface, but a fierce battle raged inside Lucas. He took Leo to school at the same time, walked the same hallways, and saw the same faces, but a part of him was no longer there as before. Maria still kept her distance. She was professional, polite, silent. And Alex was more present than ever. Although the boy didn't know the weight he carried, although he laughed and ran in the schoolyard like any other child, Alex was a living mirror, and Lucas couldn't take his eyes off him. The way he frowned when he concentrated, the gesture of raising his eyebrow when he was curious, the habit of biting the corner of his lips when he thought. It was all Lucas. Small details that no one else would notice, but which he recognized as if seeing himself in a shattered reflection. It was how time tested the endurance of silence. But now, the silence came from Lucas. Not out of cowardice, but out of respect. After everything he had heard, he understood that Maria didn't need a man trying to fix what he broke. She needed space. And Alex needed genuine care, not empty promises. That's why he just watched, from a distance, with his heart slowly being consumed by that innocent presence so much like his own. Until one day, without telling anyone, he walked into a children's store downtown. He walked down the aisles like a person exploring unknown territory. He saw toys, books, tiny clothes. His throat tightened. Everything there spoke of childhood, of lost time. Everything seemed to say, this space was yours, and you didn't even know it. At the back of the store, he found what he was looking for. A photo album, a light gray fabric cover, untitled. He bought it, paid in cash. Didn't ask for a bag. At home, he took a pen, and in his firm handwriting, he wrote on the cover, "For the part of my life I can still get to know." He stared at those words for a long time. They weren't poetry. They weren't grand. But they were true. The next day, he took Leo to school as usual. But before his son went in, he said, "You go ahead. I'll catch up inside." Leo nodded, used to it. Lucas waited. And when Alex appeared, alone, with his pencil case in his hand and his backpack hanging from one shoulder, Lucas took a deep breath, knelt down, and said, without rehearsing, "Hi, Alex." The boy stopped. He smiled slightly, his gaze shy but curious. "Hi." Lucas held out the package, without many words. "This is for you, if you want it." Alex took it. He looked at the cover. Then he looked at him. "What is it?" "A photo album, but it's empty," Lucas replied. Alex frowned, confused. "Why?" "Because I want to start a collection of memories with you," Lucas answered, not looking away. "But only if you want to." Alex was silent. He held the album with his two small hands. His eyes examined every corner, as if it were a map to a place he wasn't sure he wanted to enter. "And what are we going to put in it?" Lucas smiled slightly. "Everything that's important to us. Photos, drawings, candy wrappers if you want. It doesn't matter what. What matters is that it's ours." Silence. One of those silences that lasts for seconds, but seems to expand the whole chest. Then Alex nodded. "Okay." Lucas didn't move. The boy broke into a small but sincere smile. A smile that said, "Yes." And that, on its own, was more than Lucas expected. He didn't say anything else. He didn't ask if he could be called Dad. He didn't try to force a feeling. He just offered what he had. Presence. And Alex accepted that. Maria watched from a distance. She was at the classroom door. She saw the gesture, but she didn't intervene. She didn't do anything. But the way she leaned her back against the wall afterward said it all. That night, Lucas took an empty picture frame from a drawer and placed the first drawing Alex had given him inside it. The two of them riding a bicycle, still faceless, but with both of them smiling. Leo saw the frame on the table and asked, "Who drew that?" "Alex," Lucas replied simply. "My best friend." "I know. You like him, don't you?" Lucas paused. He thought. And he said, "Very much." Leo didn't ask any more questions. He took an apple and left the kitchen. Lucas stayed there, holding the frame, thinking about all that he hadn't lived, but that he could still live. It wasn't about fixing the past. It was about taking responsibility for the present, without rushing, without demands, but with truth. And that night, for the first time in weeks, he slept without pain in his chest, without guilt screaming, without the feeling that everything was lost, because he couldn't change what had ceased to be. But he could choose finally who he wanted to be now. Part 7. A Family Reborn. The scene cuts to a series of quick, heartfelt moments. Lucas playing soccer with both boys in the yard. Maria standing and watching them from a distance. Everything is natural and gentle. A warm, hopeful light envelops everything. The following days were calm on the surface, but intense inside. Lucas, who once entered the school with his body present and his heart far away, now walked with both in the same place. He no longer needed to pretend he had a reason. He no longer acted as if he was there by chance. He was there for Alex, for Leo, for Maria, but also for himself. It was like learning to walk again, approaching carefully, speaking softly, existing without invading. At first, everything was a timid rehearsal. Lucas would sit on the same bench near the yard. Sometimes he would bring a children's book under his arm. Other times, a juice box or a coloring page. He never drew attention. He never demanded presence. He simply appeared and stayed. Alex would watch him from a distance, like someone testing the frequency of a new sound. An adult who didn't shout, didn't command, didn't explain too much. He just looked at him as if he were the center of something important. And that was new. So new that it hurt. Leo, as always, seemed to be 2 steps ahead. He would run between the two of them, connecting their silences with random questions. If he sensed that something bigger was happening, he didn't say so. Perhaps he felt that some things don't need an explanation, only time. On a gray Tuesday, Lucas arrived early and brought 3 kites, a blue one, a red one, and a black one with stars. He said they were for testing the afternoon wind. Leo jumped for joy. Alex hesitated, then smiled slightly. And they went. They ran in the field next to the parking lot. The kites took a while to get up, but when they did, they all went up together. Maria saw it all from the classroom window, with her arms crossed and her chest full of things she still couldn't name. The anger was gone, but there wasn't complete trust either. She allowed herself to watch, but she still didn't know how far to let him in. After all, she had spent years raising her son alone, also raising her own boundaries. On Thursday, Lucas appeared with a small box, made of light wood. He showed it to Alex. To keep our memories from the album. Alex opened it and smiled. Inside, there was a small, folded note with neat handwriting. "Today was great. I want more." It was from Lucas. Alex took the note. He put it in his pocket. "Can I draw something to put in here too?" Lucas nodded. "Whatever you want." Maria, seeing that from a distance, took a step back. Then, on an impulse, she walked toward them. "Alex, the coordinator wants to talk to you about the presentation next week." The boy ran off. Just the two of them were left. Lucas took a deep breath. "I didn't know if I should keep coming. But I'm here, not to fix things, just to be." Maria nodded. "I noticed. And you? I'm watching. Is that okay?" "It's the best I can do for now." He didn't insist. He smiled with tired eyes. That's already a lot. On Friday, something changed. Alex and Leo were playing soccer with other kids. The ball came at them very hard. Alex tried to defend and fell to his knees. His scream was immediate. Lucas ran without thinking. He got there before any other adult. He knelt on the dirt ground, saw the thin trickle of blood. "Alex, look at me. It's okay. Breathe." The boy looked at him, his eyes filled with tears. The pain wasn't just from the cut. "If I cry, will you still stay?" Lucas felt the air disappear. He held the boy's face with both hands. "You can cry. I'm not going to leave you. Without shame, without fear." Lucas pulled the boy into his chest, hugged him tightly, and felt his body trembling against his. And that's when Maria arrived. But she stopped a few steps away. She saw the scene, and she said nothing. Because in that moment, there was nothing to say. It was something that belonged only to the two of them. The next week, Alex handed Lucas an envelope. Inside, there was a new drawing. This time, the figures were facing forward. Lucas with a blue cap, Leo laughing beside him, Alex in the center, holding both of their hands. In a corner of the paper, a woman in a yellow dress with a book in her hand. Maria. Below, written in careful letters. "My family." Lucas folded the paper carefully. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, like someone who saves something that can save a life. At the next recess, the four of them sat together in a corner of the yard, a slightly crooked bench under the shade of a tree. Lucas opened a bag of popcorn and put it in the center. Leo took a handful, then Alex, then Maria. None of them talked about why they were there. It wasn't necessary. Their eyes said it all. Time had stopped being a villain. The silence, which used to scream, was now company. Lucas didn't rebuild what he lost, because some things can't be rebuilt. But for the first time, he built what he never had the chance to start. And sometimes, that is enough. And now, what would you do if you were in their shoes? If this story touched you in some way, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and above all, share it with someone who needs to see it. Every share helps the channel grow and motivates us to keep bringing you real, intense, and emotional stories like this one. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapters. Because sometimes, the past doesn't come back to reclaim you, but to give you a second chance.
Lily, a girl who grew up in one of Brooklyn's poorest neighborhoods, never believed her life could be anything more than hardship and survival. Every morning, she woke to the sounds of honking cars, neighbors arguing, and her Aunt Martha's worsening cough, the only family she had left. Life didn't spare the weak, and Lily had learned early how to be tough just to get by. But everything changed on one fateful night. Desperate to save her dying aunt without a single dime to her name, Lily made a reckless choice. She tried to rob a well-dressed stranger in the street. What she didn't expect was that instead of being arrested, she was the one taken. And from that moment on, she was thrown into a story no one would believe. A story where love began with a robbery. In a shabby room buried deep in Brooklyn's slums, Lily curled up on a creaky wooden bed beside her Aunt Martha, a frail woman scrubbing clothes with blistered hands. Above them, a tattered roof full of holes leaked rainwater every time it stormed, turning their shelter into a shallow pool. "Hurry up, Martha. I'm not paying for wrinkled laundry," a harsh voice rang out from the yard. Aunt Martha bowed her head and kept scrubbing, even though her hands were raw and pale from the soap. Lily clenched her jaw. She had seen her aunt mistreated and underpaid for years, but it still made her blood boil. Unable to hold back, Lily snapped, "If you want clean and crisp clothes, maybe wash them yourself, and if you're hiring help, at least pay her what she deserves." The neighbor glared at her. "If you're so smart, why don't you get a real job and feed your aunt?" Lily's fists tightened. That's exactly what she planned to do. She walked from one store to another, fast food joints, retail shops, tiny diners, only to hear the same line, "Sorry, no experience, no diploma, no job." By sundown, Lily dragged herself home, heart heavy. But what she found made her freeze. Aunt Martha collapsed on the floor, coughing violently, blood dripping from her lips. "Martha!" Lily screamed, rummaging through drawers and shelves, only to find a wooden box with a handful of coins. Desperation swallowed her whole. As night fell, Lily wandered the streets alone, aimless, hopeless, until she saw him. A tall man in an expensive coat, his wristwatch gleaming under the streetlight. Without thinking, Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out her small knife. "Stop!" Lily stepped in front of the man, eyes cold, rusty knife steady in her grip. The stranger halted, raising an eyebrow as if the scene were nothing but a joke. "What is this, your idea of making a living?" "Don't push me. This is a knife, not a toy," Lily snapped, her knuckles white around the handle. "You think this is how to survive?" he said, unfazed. "I'm not reacting because I can tell you're desperate. But have you ever tried asking for help?" "No one helps someone like me," she shouted. "Now hand over your wallet before I lose my patience." With a resigned sigh, the man removed his watch, wallet, and phone. "My name is Ethan Cross. If you really need the money, then take it." Lily grabbed the items and ran. Her heart pounded as she disappeared into the shadows, hands trembling, not just from fear, but from a strange flicker of hope. She truly believed that was the last she'd ever see of the man. Lily thought the robbery would be left in the past. But the very next morning, while she was cooking porridge for Aunt Martha, her world flipped upside down. The door burst open, a strange man walked in, followed by two men in black suits. Before she could scream, a strong hand covered her mouth and dragged her away in a whirlwind of confusion and fear. When she came to, Lily found herself tied to a chair in a bright, luxurious room. Her head was spinning. Standing before her was the very man she had robbed the night before. "Ethan Cross, are you insane? You kidnapped me over a few dollars?" she yelled. Ethan leaned against a desk, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. "No, I don't want money. I need a wife." Lily's jaw dropped. "Excuse me? I have to get married immediately, for business reasons. You crossed me, so now I'm giving you a choice. Marry me or go to jail. And I won't just send you. Your aunt's coming too." Lily froze. Her heart raced. Aunt Martha wouldn't survive prison, and Lily had no way out. You have 1 week to decide, Ethan said, walking out. The week passed like a nightmare, and on the very last day, Lily nodded in defeat. Ethan picked her up in a sleek luxury car. When they arrived at the mansion, he said coldly, "Pick a room." "Really?" she asked, hopeful. "Yes, in my room. You can either sleep on the floor or build a pillow wall." Lily glared. "You're in..." Ethan smirked. "I'm your husband now. You better get used to it." From their very first night together, Lily made the boundaries clear. She stacked nearly a dozen pillows down the middle of the king-sized bed like a fortress. "Rules simple. No one crosses the line," she said firmly. Ethan glanced at the pillow wall and chuckled. "You think I'm dying to cuddle a cactus?" Lily shot him a glare. "Good. Keep your delusions to yourself." The next morning, while Ethan was reviewing documents in his office, Lily walked in carrying a large plastic basin full of clothes. "What the hell are you doing?" he asked, frowning. "Laundry," she replied plainly. "There's a washing machine." "I'm not used to machines. Hand washing is faster." "Don't turn my house into a laundromat," Ethan grumbled. "Our house, remember?" Lily smirked, stressing the word. The following days were filled with constant bickering, from Lily blasting pop music at 7 a.m. to Ethan complaining it ruined his classical piano mornings, from whether knives should be placed blade up or blade down in the sink to who washed the dishes first. Yet somewhere between all that arguing and eye-rolling, something began to shift. When Lily cooked dinner for the first time, Ethan stared at the food: chicken soup, fried fish, and warm white rice. "I don't eat street food," he muttered. "This isn't street food, and by the way, it's free. Eat it or starve," she said, arms crossed. Reluctantly, Ethan tried a bite, then another. Finally, he nodded subtly. "Not bad." "Not bad? I'm the top chef of my block," Lily grinned. "Just shut up and eat," Ethan replied, hiding a smile. That night, they still slept separated by a wall of pillows. But Ethan no longer minded her constant noise. She brought a sound he hadn't heard in years, the sound of a home. And Lily realized that inside this massive mansion, she didn't feel quite so alone anymore. But the most surprising moment came one evening when Ethan returned from work. The house was lit softly, the dining table set with candles, and a carrot cake sat proudly in the center. Lily stepped out from the kitchen holding a lighter. "Happy birthday, Ethan," she said softly. He froze. "How did you know?" "I found the date on one of your papers. Today's March 31st. Ethan sat down, looking at the table. Fried fish, vegetable soup, steaming rice, and the warm scent of carrot cake filled the air. "You made all this?" "Did you think I hired a caterer?" Lily scoffed. "Eat, even if it's bad. You better praise it." After a quiet pause, Ethan nodded. "It's good." For the first time, they shared a meal without bickering. That night, even though the pillow wall still stood between them, their hearts inched a little closer. As time passed, what Lily once called a forced joke slowly became a life she couldn't deny anymore. She found herself waiting for Ethan to come home each night. She cooked his favorite meals, knew when he needed strong coffee and when he simply needed a silent hug. And Ethan, the man who used to be cold as stone, now smiled when she nagged him, apologized when he was wrong, and most notably, stopped rebuilding the pillow wall. One evening, while Lily was washing dishes, Ethan walked up behind her and gently wrapped his arms around her waist. She flinched slightly. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "I just wanted to hold you for a bit," he whispered. Lily froze. That kind of touch made her heartbeat race, and that scared her more than anything. Because deep down, she knew she had fallen in love with him. She had tried to keep everything within the bounds of paper, of logic, but her heart had gone rogue. That night, when Ethan pulled her close and kissed her, Lily didn't pull away. The kiss was slow, tender, but full of longing. And that night they gave each other more than just their bodies. It was everything they had never dared to say aloud. But when morning came, reality returned. Lily lay still, watching the man beside her sleep, his hand still gently holding hers as if afraid to let go. She knew, if she stayed, she would love him too deeply to ever leave. And so, she had to leave before it was too late. The next morning, the sun filtered through the curtains, but her side of the bed was cold. When Ethan woke up, the bed was empty. No Lily, no sarcastic morning smirks, just a short note. "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore." He froze. He tore through the mansion, called every staff member, checked every security camera. All confirmed the same truth. Lily had left. At dawn. But what struck Ethan first wasn't anger. It was fear. He didn't care about the wedding, the contract, or his reputation anymore. He just wanted her back. The woman who filled his cold mansion with laughter, warm meals, and a sense of real life. It didn't take long. Using every connection he had, Ethan tracked her down to a small countryside house where she was hiding with Aunt Martha. That evening, Ethan stood before the old wooden door, his hand clenched. He knocked 3 times. Lily opened it, and her heart stopped. When she saw him, "You shouldn't have come," she said, forcing her voice to stay cold. "And I'm not leaving," Ethan replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "I didn't come to scold you. I came to say, I love you, Lily." She stepped back, tears brimming in her eyes. "I ran because I'm terrified that if I stay, I'll love you too much and one day, I'll lose you." Ethan stepped forward, gently holding her hand. "I'm not going anywhere. No matter how many times you push me away, I'll come back, not because of a contract, but because I choose to love you. Every day, forever." Lily didn't respond to Ethan right away. She quietly closed the door and left him standing outside. The next morning, as she stepped out early to fetch water, she was startled to see Ethan curled up on the old wooden bench on the porch. His shirt was wrinkled, hair messy, but his eyes still held the same spark from the night before. "You slept out here all night?" she asked, a little unsettled. "Yeah, you didn't let me in, so I waited." Lily sighed and walked back inside. But Ethan didn't leave. Instead, he stayed. No promises, no flowers, no diamond rings, just action. He woke up early with her every morning to fetch water, washed clothes by hand under the scorching sun. The first time, he tore his shirt, got soap in his eyes, but laughed like a kid discovering hard work. "What are you doing?" Lily asked, watching him clumsily fold clothes. "Learning how to live with you," he answered without hesitation. He helped her cook, chopped vegetables, lit the wood stove, burning the dish 3 times in a row. He fetched rice, waded through the canal to pick herbs, mopped floors, and even fixed the squeaky door that had annoyed her for weeks. Lily looked at his muddy clothes and laughed. "You look like a soaked chicken." "But a chicken in love," Ethan replied casually. None of his actions were perfect, but they were real. He wasn't used to housework or manual labor, but he was good at softening her heart. Gradually, Lily stopped avoiding his gaze. She started waiting for him each morning, brewing coffee while he mopped the floor, teaching him the difference between lettuce and mint. When he messed up, she no longer scolded. She smiled. One afternoon, when Ethan accidentally spilled a basket of tomatoes across the yard, Lily knelt beside him, picking them up one by one. "You know," she whispered, "I used to believe no one would ever sacrifice anything for me." Ethan said nothing, but through his roughened hands, dirt-stained clothes, and unwavering eyes, he had already given her the answer. The day Lily decided to return to New York with Ethan, it was lightly raining. Aunt Martha held her hand, eyes glistening. "Are you sure?" Lily nodded. He didn't just talk, he proved it. Back in the city, they didn't rush into a grand wedding like before. This time, everything felt different, slower, more sincere, and deeply emotional. The ceremony took place in a small old church, attended only by close friends and a few family members. No stage lights, no fireworks, just Ethan's eyes as he watched Lily walk down the aisle. the eyes of a man seeing the one he'd waited for his entire life. "You look stunning," he whispered when she reached him. Lily smiled, eyes shining. "I know, but you're not too bad yourself." Their vows weren't extravagant, no fancy promises, no poetry, just raw, honest words that came straight from the heart. "I used to think I'd live alone forever," Ethan said. "Until you came into my life," loud, stubborn, and impossible to ignore. "And I used to believe no one would ever love a girl like me," Lily replied, "until you washed clothes with me under the sun." They laughed, then kissed as applause echoed through the church. A new chapter began, not because they had to, but because they chose each other. This time, for forever. A few months after the wedding, Lily suddenly fainted while preparing breakfast. Ethan panicked and rushed her to the hospital. He didn't leave her side as the doctor performed the checkup. Then came the soft, life-changing words, "Congratulations, you're going to be parents." Ethan froze for a second, then broke into laughter and pulled Lily into his arms. She was still in shock, eyes brimming with tears. They were going to have a baby. The months that followed were the most peaceful they had ever known. Ethan took care of Lily meticulously. Ginger porridge every morning, foot massages when she felt tired, and even fumbling through pregnancy books, mispronouncing every other word. The day baby Evelyn was born, Ethan cried like a child. He held Lily's hand tightly and whispered, "You've given me a family." Aunt Martha stood nearby, wiping tears. "You deserve this, Lily, all of it." Years passed. The once quiet mansion now echoed with laughter. Evelyn ran around endlessly, once climbing onto the table and shouting, "Mom, look! I'm standing on the world." Lily gasped, "Get down, you're giving me a heart attack." Ethan laughed from the side. "See that? She's just like you." In moments like that, Lily would look at Ethan, the man she once hated, once robbed, and now, the man who loved her beyond anything. One night, under the soft glow of the moon, they sat together on the balcony. Lily rested her head on his shoulder and asked quietly, "Do you ever regret it, choosing a poor, stubborn girl who once mugged you in the street?" Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. "If I could go back, I'd let you rob me even sooner." They both laughed. Their story wasn't perfect, but their love was. Not built on circumstances or contracts, but on two broken souls who chose each other, again and again, every day. And in a world full of uncertainty, that choice made all the difference. If this story touched your heart even just a little, don't forget to support us. Like, share, and hit that subscribe button to follow more unforgettable love stories, only on Noah's Stories. Got thoughts or feelings? Drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear your voice. Because here at Noah's Stories, every story has a soul. And maybe the next one will feel like it was written just for you. The top floor of the Elara Hotel glowed under a warm haze of dim lighting, as if the air itself had been filtered through velvet. Crystal chandeliers sent fractured light across the high arched ceiling, and beyond the windows, the city shimmered like shattered glass. Soft jazz threaded its way through clusters of well-dressed guests, their low murmurs tailored to maintain a sense of privacy. Elise Rowan hovered at the threshold of the private lounge, heels sinking into plush gray carpet, one hand clutching an empty tray. She drew in a slow breath before stepping in, even as every part of her body warned she didn't belong here. The perfume in the air was dizzying, almost too luxurious to breathe. The black dress her sister Claire had forced her to borrow clung too tightly, too smoothly, too far from anything Elise would ever choose for herself. The heels pinched like guilt. She wasn't here to shine. She was supposed to be downstairs, behind the coat check, but Claire had twisted her ankle that morning and pleaded, just for one night, serve the drinks, say nothing, don't draw attention. That hadn't worked out. He stood alone by the glass wall, tall, composed, dressed in a charcoal suit with silver cufflinks that caught the light. The drink in his hand didn't move, but his eyes did. They were fixed on Elise. She tried to look away, but he was already walking. Each of his steps was deliberate, unhurried, like distance bent around him instead of the other way around. When he stopped in front of her, he didn't ask for a drink. He didn't greet her. He simply said, "You're early." Elise blinked. "I'm sorry?" His voice was smooth, level. "I don't usually request new ones, but your file said you're discreet." "I think you've got the wrong person." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a sleek black card with a gold crest embossed in the center and handed it to her. Penthouse, 30 minutes. Then he turned and walked away. As if he'd already closed the deal, Elise stood frozen, heart pounding. She looked at the card, then at his retreating figure. What the hell just happened? She spun around, ready to chase after him. But before she could move, 2 guards approached and gently gestured toward a velvet-lined corridor. "This way, miss." Her voice caught. She said nothing. Just before the exit, a woman in a tailored blazer stopped her. "You're Elise Rowan, right?" "Yes." "Mr. Julian Hart said to expect you at Hartwell Tower, 9 a.m. sharp. He's waiting for his new personal assistant." Elise stood still, reeling. What kind of man mistakes a stranger and turns that mistake into a job? The morning came, wrapped in a thin veil of mist, turning the city into something seen through frosted glass. Elise Rowan stood before Hartwell Tower, a sleek monolith of glass and steel slicing into the gray sky, cold and impersonal, built to remind people that not everything in this city was accessible. In one hand she held a warm coffee, in the other a thick envelope delivered the night before. Inside, a temporary ID badge, no instructions, no note. She hadn't slept. The images from the rooftop lounge replayed on a loop. Julian Hart, calm and still as if reading her like a file. Elise didn't know what this was, but she knew she couldn't afford to ignore it, not when every other option was drying up. At exactly 9 o'clock IEM, she stepped inside. "Elise Rowan," she told the receptionist. The woman gave a nod, as if her arrival was expected. "Mr. Hart is waiting. Private elevator. To your right." The glass elevator lifted her skyward, past the ordinary, the familiar, the safe. The higher she went, the more everything below felt irrelevant. When the doors slid open, she stepped into a hallway of silence. Carpeted floors, golden light that didn't feel warm. She walked toward the last door. Julian stood by the window, back turned, phone in hand. When she entered, he ended the call and turned to her. There was no surprise in his eyes. "You came." Elise raised the coffee like a shield. "I wasn't sure I should." "Most wouldn't," he replied. "That's what I needed to know." He gestured toward the small conference table. She didn't move. "You think I'm someone I'm not." "I used to," he said. "Now, I don't." He handed her a folder. Standard contract, personal assistant, my calendar, internal communication, some off-hour obligations, competitive pay, unpredictable schedule, total discretion. She opened it. The number on the first page took her breath away. More than she'd made in 5 years doing 3 jobs. Still, she looked up. Why me? Julian didn't flinch. Because in this building, everyone is either trying to impress me or avoid me. You don't care about either. Elise couldn't remember the exact moment she said yes. After that, everything felt like stepping into a current too strong to swim against. The contract was signed. Her access badge was issued that same afternoon. A small office, directly adjacent to Julian Hart's, had already been prepared. From the moment she stepped inside, Elise knew she had entered a different world. Her first official day began with 7 emails, 3 meetings, and a schedule timed down to the minute. There was no handover from a previous assistant, no orientation. No one told her what to do. There was only the work, silent and relentless. Julien never raised his voice. He never repeated himself. If Elise missed something, he would simply move on and do it himself. Being bypassed like that was its own kind of reprimand, quiet but sharp. The rest of the office staff watched her. No one welcomed her. Elise quickly became the quiet figure trailing behind Julian, tablet in hand, eyes on the clock, lips pressed shut. But slowly, she started to learn his unspoken language. A slight pause in his step meant there was an error in the brief. A flick of the pen meant she should end the call. A barely there frown meant dissatisfaction, one no one else seemed to notice. She memorized them all. No one taught her. What unsettled her most was this: Julian never wasted a word. No small talk, no praise, no casual questions. He simply watched, remembered, instructed, and moved forward. Once, when she handed him a press release draft, he read silently until paragraph 3. Then he said, "Rewrite it." That reads like desperation trying to pass as confidence. She rewrote it. He nodded once. That was it. Each night, Elise returned to her small apartment, where Mia, her younger sister, would be waiting with leftover dinner and eyes that didn't need to ask if she was okay. "You quit yet?" Mia would ask. Elise would shrug, "Not yet." Because Julian Hart was everything Elise had never encountered: cold, controlled, unreadable. But he was the only person she ever wanted to understand. That morning started like any other. Tightly packed meetings, stacks of documents on Elise's desk, and Julian Hart as punctual and unreadable as ever. What Elise didn't expect was to become part of a gala she had no intention of attending. "You're coming with me tonight," Julian said, stepping into her office without looking up from a folder. Elise blinked. "Sorry? I thought events like that were handled by the PR team." "My last assistant coordinated them personally. You'll do it tonight." He was already turning away before she could argue. She stood, swallowed the refusal that had reached her throat, and followed. That evening, Elise wore the plainest black dress she owned. Hair pulled back, heels low, makeup subtle. She didn't want to stand out, and she didn't. All night, she walked beside Julian, whispering reminders, tracking guest arrivals, signaling the logistics crew. Everything was smooth, until she arrived. Evelyn Vale, PR queen, the only woman ever seen with Julian for more than 2 months, and his ex-fiancé. She approached with a champagne flute like it was a blade. Smile soft as silk and twice as dangerous. "You must be the new assistant," Evelyn said. Her voice was honeyed velvet, but her eyes were razors. Elise nodded. "I am." "Interesting. You've got that disposable look, like you won't last the month," and tried to understand what her friend was feeling. But she couldn't shake the denial. Elise didn't flinch. Evelyn's smile froze for a single breath. Then she leaned in closer. "Be careful, sweetheart. He doesn't keep people. He keeps silence. You'll see." Before Elise could respond, Julian appeared beside them. His gaze flicked between the two women, expression unreadable. Evelyn gave a saccharine smile and walked away, not saying another word. Julian turned to Elise, voice quiet, even. "You handled that well." The car ride home from the gala was quiet. Elise sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the blur of city lights streaking past the window. Beside her, Julian remained absorbed in his phone, his posture composed, unreadable. When the car rolled to a stop in front of her building, he spoke without looking at her. "She was testing you." Elise turned to him, voice even. "That was a test?" He didn't answer. The door clicked open. She stepped out, heart oddly steady. Not angry, not hurt, just quiet. The next morning, she arrived at the office on time, just like every day. Checked the calendar, sent confirmations, reviewed memos. Julian said nothing. No one else did either. Till 11:07. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mia. "What's happening? Your name is everywhere." Elise blinked. Then another text. "Check the news." She did. And everything shifted. A leading gossip site had published a headline in bold red. CEO Julian Hart accused of hiring assistants from escort services. Below it, a set of photos. One from the gala, her standing beside him. Another, blurry but unmistakable, from the rooftop lounge weeks ago. That exact moment, Julian handing her the black penthouse keycard. No names. But the implication was clear. The office felt quieter than usual. Not out of respect, out of scrutiny. The stares weren't subtle anymore. They followed her, measured her, judged. At the copy room, someone didn't bother whispering. Not surprising. By late afternoon, a slim folder marked HR review appeared on her desk. No sender. No explanation. But it didn't need one. At 5 p.m., Julian summoned her. He stood by the window, back turned. "You saw the article." "I did," Elise replied. "So did everyone else." "It isn't true." "It doesn't matter, does it?" He turned. Face unreadable. Then, slowly, "Is there anything I don't know?" Her breath caught. "Are you asking me if I actually did that?" Silence. She laughed, dry and sharp. "You gave me that card. You made the mistake. And now you're questioning me?" He said nothing. Elise nodded, voice calm and final. "If you still have to ask, then I was wrong to believe you." Then she left. And for the first time, she didn't look back. Elise left the city on a rainy evening, packing a few clothes, her old laptop, and her younger sister Mia. No one knew where she went. No one received a message. She didn't explain. She didn't say goodbye. She just disappeared. Not out of anger, but out of the quiet ache of needing to escape a place that promised change, but delivered disappointment. Julian didn't text, didn't call, didn't try to stop her. The room next to his office, where Elise once sat, still held an empty coffee cup, a few handwritten notes, and a silver hair clip someone had left behind in a hurry. No one touched it, no one cleaned up. And Julian, the man who never allowed empty spaces to remain for long, left it just as it was. As if by preserving everything, the one who left might find a reason to return. He still arrived on time, still handled everything as usual, but that precision had lost its edge. It had become a hollow repetition. A week passed, as if everything within him was running on habit, not conviction. And then, on the 7th day, the truth surfaced. Internal security traced the leak of the altered photos that had been released online. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a third party. It was Evelyn Vale. She had used her old PR account to send the images to a tabloid. Her motive wasn't money. It was envy. She couldn't bear the fact that Elise, a complete unknown, had managed to stay in a place where she had once been replaced. He simply gave the order to terminate every remaining contract tied to Evelyn, all within a day, silent but absolute. And yet, the one thing he truly wanted to get back never returned. Elise was gone. And for the first time in his life, Julian understood Power cannot salvage what silence has already lost. 10 days had passed since Elise disappeared. Julian didn't ask anyone, and he didn't tell anyone. But on the 11th day, he left the office on his own, for the first time without leaving a schedule behind. He wasn't going for business. He was going because something inside him had finally admitted silence was no longer a way to keep. It was a way to lose. The small house was over an hour's drive from the city, an address Mia had accidentally left in the internal scholarship system that Elise had once used to register her sister. No one knew how long Julian had kept that information. When Elise opened the door, she looked at him in silence for a few seconds. No surprise, no joy, no sadness, just the quiet of someone who had learned not to expect anything anymore. Julian gave no explanation. He simply said, "I need to talk." She let him in, the way someone opens the door to let the rain pass through the porch. Not welcomed, not turned away. "I found out who was behind it," Julian began. "It was Evelyn." "Not surprised," Elise answered, her voice steady. "I've handled it." "And you came here for what? Redemption?" "No," he replied slowly. "To admit I was wrong." Elise turned to look at him, a long, steady gaze. "Self, what do you want?" Julian took a deep breath. "I don't want you to come back in any role. I just want to know if there's still a chance for me to understand you, not as a boss, but as someone who hurt you." They sat across from each other in the small kitchen, afternoon light cutting through the thin curtain slanting across the wooden table. No one was performing now, no one was leading. Julian spoke first. "I want you to come back." Elise stayed silent for a few seconds. She didn't look surprised, but she didn't make it easy. "In what role?" "Not as an assistant," he answered instantly. "Not someone behind me, but someone who builds what we never had the chance to build properly." "Sounds like an invitation," she said, calm, "but I can't step back into that world as if nothing happened." "I don't expect you to," Julian said. "I don't want you back for the job. I want you back for the choice, made by both of us." Elise nodded slightly, fingers tracing the edge of her glass. "If I return, it won't be to manage your calendar or deliver coffee at 8:55, she met his gaze. "I won't stand behind you again." Julian nodded without hesitation. "I know, and I want you beside me." Silence returned, but this time, it was mutual understanding. "What title?" Elise asked, half serious, half challenge. Julian gave a small smile. "Director of Special Strategy, full autonomy, no limits, except trust." Elise leaned back in her chair. "Sounds like a position that's never existed." "Exactly," Julian said. "Just like this relationship, we've never started it the right way." She didn't answer right away. But the next morning, her name was back in the building's security log. No one announced her return. No one needed to. Elise returned to Hartwell Tower on a quiet morning, unnoticed. No press, no announcements. But when Julian introduced her at the executive meeting with a new business card, Director of Special Strategy, the looks in the room had changed. She no longer stood behind. She sat beside. Julian didn't just assign. He asked for her opinion. She no longer had to prove anything. Her presence was enough. They never spoke of love, not once. But the way Julian quietly paused outside her office each morning, the way Elise always left an empty seat beside her in every meeting, were like whispered sentences that needed no words. On the night of the major press conference, Elise coordinated everything. Headset on, clipboard in hand, her eyes moved across every detail backstage like someone who knew the battlefield by heart. Julian stood below the stage, his gaze following her through the crowd. He didn't step forward, didn't interfere. He just waited. When the event ended, Elise walked toward the back, her breath still catching the rhythm of urgency. Julian stood there, holding a small velvet box. She opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant necklace with a small silver star at its center. "You never needed my world to shine," Julian said quietly. "I saw it the first night. You didn't even know you were lit from within." No promises were made. Just this. When Elise reached for the gift, Julian took her hand. Soft, but steady. And so, they walked together. Not back to what used to be, but towards something earned, something chosen, quiet enough to trust, real enough to stay. Nadia Moore sat by the small window of her cramped apartment, her eyes silently watching the endless flow of traffic below. She loved this city, but it was also a constant reminder of the most painful memory of her life. 12 years ago, when she was just 16, a car accident shattered her world. It was a rainy night, much like this one. Her father had been driving, her mother humming softly to the radio. Then, screeching tires, blinding headlights, a deafening crash. The last thing she remembered was her mother's terrified gasp and the unbearable silence that followed. When she woke up in the hospital covered in wounds, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the unbearable loss she had to endure. Since then, the fear of driving clung to her like a ghost, turning every moment behind the wheel into a battle against herself. Now, at 28, Nadia was a freelance writer, specializing in romance novels. Despite her talent and passion, success remained elusive. She took on ghostwriting jobs to make ends meet, but her income was unpredictable, barely enough to keep her afloat. Lately, financial troubles had been closing in on her. Overdue rent, unpaid bills, and the growing fear of whether she could continue pursuing her dream weighed heavily on her mind. Yet deep down, she knew that writing wasn't just a job. It was a part of her soul, the only thing that made her feel truly alive. But what Nadia didn't know was that a fateful event was waiting for her, one that would change her life forever. The rain poured down heavily, casting a cold, misty veil over the dark streets. Nadia gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to steady her breathing as a wave of panic crashed over her. She never wanted to drive, ever. But today she had no choice. Lily had asked her to pick up an urgent manuscript from a cafe, and she hated letting fear dictate her life. As the car entered a deserted road, her heartbeat quickened. Her breaths grew shallow, cold sweat forming on her palms. Then the memories came rushing back. Another rainy night, screeching brakes, blinding headlights. And then it happened again. A pair of headlights flared in front of her. No, she slammed the brakes, but it was too late. A loud, sickening crash echoed through the empty street as her car collided straight into an Aston Martin DBS Superleggera. Nadia's hands trembled as she stumbled out of the vehicle, her stomach twisting at the sight of the massive dent in the luxury car. A tall figure stepped out, his black hair slightly damp from the rain, his tailored suit still impeccable. Albert Johnson, the CEO of the country's most powerful publishing empire. He inspected the damage, then turned his sharp, unreadable gaze to Nadia. $50,000. How do you plan to pay for this? Nadia's mouth fell open. 50,000? She didn't even have 500 to spare. Albert studied her reaction, a flicker of calculation flashing in his gray eyes. His family had been relentless. Marry, settle down, take responsibility. He had spent months dodging blind dates and rejecting their choices. But now, standing before him was an opportunity he hadn't anticipated, a woman who had nothing to gain from him, who needed something just as badly as he needed an escape. If she agreed, it would be perfect. A contract marriage, no emotions, no attachment. His gaze shifted back to Nadia, a stranger, unattached with no reason to demand affection from him. Or you could marry me for 1 year, the debt will be erased. Nadia froze. His offer was insane, but did she really have another choice? Nadia never imagined marrying a stranger, let alone Albert Johnson. A man who didn't believe in love, who viewed marriage as nothing more than a transaction. The wedding was swift, emotionless. No white dress, no heartfelt vows. Just a signature on a marriage certificate, and it was done. Nadia Moore had become Mrs. Johnson. But from the moment she stepped into his luxurious penthouse, she realized she wasn't a wife. She was just another part of his plan. Albert controlled everything. She had to change her wardrobe to fit the image of a perfect Mrs. Johnson. She had to attend extravagant social events, play the role of a devoted wife beside him in front of business associates. And worst of all, he wouldn't let her write. "You don't need to write anymore," Albert stated bluntly when he caught her opening her laptop. "We have an agreement. Play your part." Nadia clenched her fists, swallowing the anger rising inside her. Writing was her lifeline, her escape. But to Albert, it was nothing more than a waste of time. Their relationship became increasingly strained. Albert wasn't cruel to her, but he never truly treated her as a person either. Then, one night, during their most heated argument yet, Albert let his deepest wound slip. "You think I enjoy controlling everything?" His voice was rough, his stormy gray eyes darker than ever. "Do you even know what it's like to love someone? To believe in a future, only to have it shattered?" Nadia stood frozen. For the first time, she saw raw pain in his eyes. Albert let out a bitter laugh, but his voice was hollow, his hands clenched at his sides. "She carried my child, and I never even knew. By the time she told me, it was already over." His breath shuddered. She looked me in the eye and said it wasn't the right time. Then she left, to be with someone who was ready. He exhaled sharply, his eyes dark with something raw and unspoken. Since that day, I decided I would never let anyone else have the power to hurt me like that again. Silence. Nadia's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't even begin to imagine that kind of pain. But understanding his past didn't mean she would let him control her. And soon she would prove it to him. Nadia had never felt so alone. She was no longer herself. Each day in the grand penthouse stripped away another piece of her. Albert controlled everything, what she wore, where she went. But the worst part was not the expensive dresses or the fake social events. It was the fact that he had taken away her right to write. But Nadia refused to be silenced. Every night, when the apartment fell into silence, she would pull out her old notebook from under her pillow and write. Those pages were the only place she could be honest. She wrote about the suffocating marriage, about the man who slept just a wall away but felt a world apart, about the emptiness in his gray eyes, about the way he tried to control everything because of his past pain. And then, one night, Albert found it. She was in the bedroom when she heard the sound of pages flipping. A cold shiver ran down her spine. When she stepped into the living room, she saw him standing there, her notebook in one hand, his knuckles white from clenching his fist. His eyes darkened as he read. He is a lonely man, incapable of love. He is so afraid of being hurt that he turns everything around him into a prison, including me. Albert lifted his gaze, his voice dangerously quiet. "So this is what you think of me?" He gripped the journal tightly, his knuckles turning white. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, hesitation. Then, as if convincing himself, his jaw tightened. R.I.P. In a single movement, the pages of her journal were torn apart in his hands. "Albert, stop!" She lunged forward, but it was too late. The shredded pages floated to the ground like scattered snowflakes. Nadia froze, tears pooling in her eyes, not from anger but from pure devastation. That notebook wasn't just paper and ink. It was her soul. She looked at the man in front of her, the man who had controlled her, stripped her of her identity, and now he had destroyed the last piece of her. Her breath hitched, and in that moment, a chilling realization sank in. Albert would never change. Her tears stopped, her heart hardened. Without another word, she turned and walked into the bedroom. 10 minutes later, she emerged with a small backpack slung over her shoulder. Albert looked at her, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice was no longer angry, just cautious. Nadia placed a folded piece of paper on the table. Her voice was steady, but her words cut like a knife. "I don't belong here. I'll pay you back in a month. Don't look for me." Without waiting for his response, she turned and walked out. Albert stood frozen, staring at the closed door. There was an emptiness in his chest, as if he had just lost something important, but he didn't understand what it was. Nadia stepped onto the rainy streets, the drizzle mixing with the last of her tears, but this time she wasn't crying out of pain. She was crying for freedom. She had made her choice. Nadia left the city when the sky was still tinged with a muted shade of gray and the streets had yet to wake. She didn't know exactly where she was going. She only knew that she had to leave, had to escape Albert, had to escape everything. She found herself in a quiet countryside town where endless fields stretched beyond the horizon and the wind carried the scent of fresh earth. No one knew her here. There were no lavish parties, no cold, piercing stares from Albert, no suffocating sense of control. But something inside her still missed him. At first, she told herself it was just habit. But at night, when the world outside grew dark and silent, memories of Albert crept back in. The way he sat alone with a glass of whiskey, staring into the void like a man who had lost more than he could ever admit. Time passed quietly, peacefully. One afternoon, Nadia sat beneath a towering oak tree by the lake, her laptop resting on her lap. She took a deep breath, allowing the past to resurface. And then she started to write. Not a novel, not an article, but the story of her and Albert. She wrote about their marriage of convenience, the suffocation, the pain of losing herself. But she also wrote about a lonely man, one who didn't know how to love because he had been broken before. She posted the story anonymously on social media. She expected nothing, just a way to release the emotions she had bottled up for so long. But what she didn't realize was, by the next morning, that story would change everything. The penthouse felt empty in a way it never had before since Nadia left. Albert wasn't used to this silence. He had once thought he liked it. No distractions, no emotions to deal with. But now, the quiet was suffocating, a cruel reminder that she was gone. At first, he told himself she would come back, that she was just being impulsive. But as the days passed, her absence became a hollow ache inside him. He realized he missed her. He missed waking up to see her sitting by the window with a cup of coffee. He missed the way she smiled quietly while reading. He even missed their arguments, because at least then she was still here. Albert wanted to find her, but a part of him was afraid. He had never apologized to anyone before, never admitted he was wrong. Then one evening, while absent-mindedly scrolling through his phone, a story stopped him cold. A tale about a marriage without love, about a man who tried to control everything because he was terrified of losing the things that mattered most. About a woman who once loved him, but couldn't stay. Every word cut deep. And then he saw the photo. A quiet countryside, a wide lake, an old oak tree. Albert stared at the image, his heart pounding. She was there. Without hesitation, he grabbed his car keys. He couldn't lose her, not because of a contract, not because of his pride, but because of a truth so simple yet so painfully clear. He loved her, and this time he would fight to keep her. Albert drove through the night, not stopping, not hesitating. He didn't know what awaited him when he found her, but he knew he couldn't let her go again. By the next afternoon, he arrived in the quiet town. No towering buildings, no extravagant parties, just open skies and endless fields. This was where she had chosen to begin again. He walked along the lake, golden hues of sunset shimmering over the water, and then he saw her. Nadia sat beneath a great oak tree, laptop in her lap, completely lost in her writing. She looked free. She looked like herself again. When she looked up and saw him, her breath caught. Albert stepped forward, his expression no longer commanding, no longer arrogant, just honest. He gently placed a notebook in front of her. "I can't give you back your old journal." His voice was rough. "But I hope you'll keep writing, and this time, without me stopping you." Nadia looked at him warily. "Why are you here, Albert?" He exhaled. "Because I was wrong. I controlled you. I let my fears dictate my actions. But after you left, I realized something. I never wanted to control you. I just didn't want to lose you." She stayed silent, watching him. "I finally understand something too," she admitted. "I thought you were just cold, incapable of love. But after I left, I realized you have loved before. You just never knew how." Albert swallowed hard. "No one has ever stayed with me before, Nadia. But you made me want to try." For the first time, the distance between them felt like it was fading, but Albert knew words weren't enough. He took a deep breath, then knelt. A simple silver ring rested in his hand, catching the last light of day. No grandeur, no expectations, just sincerity. "The first time I proposed, it was to escape my family's expectations." His voice was raw. "But this time, I'm doing it because I love you." Nadia's breath hitched. "You don't have to forgive me right now. You can say no and I'll understand, but I'll still be here, waiting, until you want me to stay." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You really are shameless," she murmured. Albert braced himself for rejection, but then she exhaled, eyes searching his face one last time. "Albert, if I say yes, will you let me be myself?" His hands trembled slightly as he held hers. "I swear it." She smiled through her tears. "Then this time, I'll say yes." And as he pulled her into his arms, for the first time there was no fear, no control, only love. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the countryside. Nadia sat on the porch of their small cottage, her laptop resting on her lap, the gentle hum of crickets filling the evening air. She had just finished another chapter of her novel, a love story that, for the first time, wasn't just fiction. It was inspired by her own life. Albert emerged from inside, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to her and sat down beside her, his presence no longer overwhelming, no longer suffocating, just comforting. "How's the story coming along?" he asked, his voice softer than it had ever been. Nadia smiled, tracing her fingers along the keyboard. "It's different this time. It's not about pain or control. It's about healing." Albert was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant fields. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn-out notebook, the one she had given him months ago. "I've been writing too," he admitted, his voice almost hesitant. Nadia's eyes widened in surprise. "You? Writing?" He let out a small chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not a novel like yours, but it's something." She took the notebook from his hands, flipping through the pages. Her heart softened as she read his scribbled words. Thoughts, reflections, small confessions of a man who is still learning how to love. Nadia looked up at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "Albert, this is beautiful." He met her gaze, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "I told you, I want to try." And as the evening breeze wrapped around him, Nadia realized something. Love wasn't about fixing each other. It was about growing together. And for the first time she knew this love would last.
The Mogul's Reckoning. A silent miracle. He walked away believing he was making the right choice, the most convenient one. But what if the life you abandon keeps growing, and one day it shows up to collect? Stephen walked leisurely through the central square of a small town in England, under the gentle afternoon sun, and the distant sound of children's laughter. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Perhaps he just wanted to escape the tedium of his stressful routine. A corporate social project had brought him to the town, but his heart felt restless, as if something, which he couldn't name, was about to happen. It was then that he heard a high-pitched meow mixed with children's giggles, a sound so pure and carefree that his feet changed direction almost on impulse. In front of a small shop with a colorful facade adorned with flower pots and animal toys, he read the handmade sign on the door. "My Sanctuary." Curious, he pushed the wooden door, which swung open with a jingle of a bell. Inside, the scene disarmed him. Two little girls were playing on the floor with a white kitten with big eyes and soft fur. They were smiling as if the world were made only of affection and lightness. But what froze him was something deeper. The girls' eyes were a deep blue, exactly like his own. Those eyes didn't belong to chance. One of the girls turned, laughing, her brown hair coming loose from her headband with the movement. The other, quieter, petted the cat delicately, as if she could feel its essence beyond touch. Stephen felt a hollow in his stomach. He didn't know if it was possible to recognize a part of himself in someone he had never seen. But there it was, a certainty etched into his chest. For a moment, the sound of the bell, the smell of pet food in the air, the afternoon heat, everything disappeared. Only that suspended instant remained. He leaned on a nearby counter, seeking balance. That's when a firm, yet calm voice cut through the silence. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" He slowly turned. The woman behind the counter seemed frozen in time, her dark hair pulled back in a messy braid, her eyes more mature, but still the same. It was Valerie, the same woman he swore he had left in the past. But now she was there, in front of him, and by her side, two little girls with eyes that would never let him sleep in peace again. Valerie's gaze was a foggy mirror, no tears, no pleas, just presence. A woman who had known abandonment, but had not surrendered to it. Stephen tried to say something, anything, but his throat was dry. The words wouldn't come, perhaps because no words could fit into that moment. The girls, oblivious to the silent hurricane between the adults, laughed and showed the kitten as if it were a trophy. Stephen could barely look at them. Doubt no longer existed. They were his. They were part of what he had once left behind, believing it was the right thing to do, or at least the most convenient. Now, everything screamed the opposite. Valerie stepped forward and took a small basket of pet toys. Her gesture was calm, almost rehearsed, but her eyes didn't lie. There was a firmness that didn't ask for permission to exist. Stephen took a deep breath, trying not to tremble. Part of him wanted to run away, as he always did. The other part knew it was already too late. Here, in this little sanctuary for animals and wounded hearts, life had come to collect its price. And it was collecting it with beauty, with innocence, with the kind of love he had spurned, but which now seemed to be the only thing that truly made sense. A father's awakening. Stephen stood still in the middle of the shop, as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. His heart was racing, out of sync, and his throat felt too tight to let any words escape. On the outside, he was the same elegant man, accustomed to important meetings and making cold decisions. On the inside, he was just confusion and fear. The girls continued to play, oblivious to what that moment meant. Their laughter was light, without guilt, without a past. But for Stephen, every sound was a painful reminder of what he had lost. That laughter could have been part of his life from the beginning, and he had thrown it all away without even looking back. Valerie watched him with a firm but not cold look. She didn't seem surprised to see him there, as if she had imagined this reunion many times in her mind, and now was simply living the scene. Her eyes said it all. Don't expect tears. Don't expect hugs. I've already cried too much for you. He tried to smile, a fragile gesture that didn't even reach his eyes. He wanted to say something, but he realized that any word would sound too small in the face of what was in front of him. The girls, his daughters. That reality settled inside him with a weight that felt physical, a weight he had once refused to carry. The more talkative of the two, Isabella, though he didn't yet know her name, showed him the white kitten with pride. "Look, Mom, he likes me," she said with sparkling eyes. Valerie just nodded, with a brief, contained smile. Stephen watched this scene like a stranger, looking through the window of a house that could have been his. "Do you want to adopt one of the kittens?" Valerie asked, her voice firm and neutral, as if he were just another customer. It was clear she didn't want to make things easy for him. He needed to feel what she'd. He needed to be pushed into the same abyss she had to climb out of alone. And deep down, he knew he deserved it. Stephen slowly approached the counter but kept his distance. His gaze sought hers, but she only met it for seconds before focusing back on the girls. It was as if she were saying, "My priority is over there, not you." And for the first time, Stephen understood what it was like not to be the center of anything. Part of him wanted to kneel, to beg for forgiveness right there. The other part, still proud, resisted. He had never had to beg for anything, but in that instant, he realized that arrogance no longer fit. Life was in front of him in the form of two little girls who didn't know who he was, and perhaps for now, it was better that way. Valerie walked away to attend to a lady entering the shop, leaving him there with the weight of his own absence. He turned to the girls. The quieter one was drawing a cat with delicate strokes, focused, as if the world around her were just a backdrop. He noticed his hands were trembling. In that instant, a certainty struck him. He wanted to be part of their lives, not as someone who arrives and takes up space, but as someone who asks for permission. For that, he would need to confront everything he had done, and even more difficult, everything he had failed to do. Stephen left the shop slowly, like a man carrying the world on his shoulders. The sun still shone over the town, but inside him, it was all shadow. He walked aimlessly through the square, trying to make sense of what he had just seen. Images of the girls returned in flashes, their hair, their eyes, the innocent way they played, and the cruel certainty grew. They were his daughters. How could he have rejected all this? That was the question burning inside him. Valerie had never sought him out. She never sent a message. She never asked him for anything. He had believed that, by turning his back, he had closed that chapter. But now he understood that the story had only changed direction, and it had continued without him. He sat on a wooden bench, the same one where so many anonymous people had rested, without imagining that a rich man, accustomed to being in control, was feeling so small. Everything he had achieved seemed distant. Because in the face of that discovery, none of it mattered anymore. Those girls had grown up without him. They had learned to take their first steps, to talk, to laugh, without hearing his voice. Someone had taught them to brush their teeth, to get dressed, to say please and thank you. And it wasn't him. Stephen thought about how many birthdays he had missed, how many bedtime stories, how many unanswered questions. Had Valerie raised them with anger toward him in her heart? Or had she kept silent out of pride, perhaps for their protection? He didn't know. but he felt that the silence between them was now a minefield. One false step, and everything could collapse. Still, he no longer had a choice. He needed to cross it. He tried to remember the last time he had thought of Valerie with real depth. It wasn't in five-star hotels or on trips. It was on silent nights, when everything was too quiet, and her face would appear without permission. And now, along with that face, came two new ones. Small, curious, alive. Stephen ran his hand over his face, covering his eyes. It was pain, yes, but also regret. Real regret. The kind that isn't solved with expensive flowers or rehearsed phrases. The kind of regret that makes a man review his own history and admit that he failed badly. He thought about going back, about knocking on the shop door and demanding answers, but the pride he still had stopped him. He didn't want to repeat the same mistake, to force a path where he needed to be invited. And he also knew that there were questions that needed to be asked and answered. He took a deep breath and looked at the blue sky. Perhaps there was still time to do things differently. But first, he needed to understand what Valerie had gone through and why she had chosen silence. A glimmer of hope. Valerie closed the shop door after the last customer left, leaving behind only the soft scent of pet food and the muffled echo of children's footsteps. The girls were still playing in their corner, laughing with a gray kitten that insisted on climbing up boxes. The atmosphere was calm, almost cozy, but between her and Stephen, the air felt denser, as if every unspoken word took up space. He had come back and was there, leaning against the counter, as if waiting for permission to stay. Valerie crossed her arms and looked at him directly. The pain that once screamed inside her was now just silence. A silence he would have to learn to listen to. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. His voice lower than usual. Valerie nodded, but with a kind of calm that wasn't an invitation. It was more of a concession. After all, she knew this moment would come. She always knew that one day the past would knock on the door. She just didn't imagine she would see his face so lost. "They're my daughters, aren't they?" he ventured. Valerie looked at him firmly, but didn't answer immediately. Deep down, she might have wanted to scream, "Yes," to dump every tear she had shed onto his lap. But she had learned that not every answer needs to be said in the heat of the moment. Sometimes, silence teaches more. "I didn't come to fight," he added. I just wanted to understand." Valerie walked to a shelf. She pretended to arrange a package of pet food. The truth was, she also needed a second to breathe. Stephen was part of a life she had to bury to move on. And now, that ghost was in front of her, with eyes full of guilt. The girls came running over with some discovery, an old toy perhaps, and showed it to their mom with excitement. Valerie knelt down, listening to every little word with attention and affection. Stephen watched from a distance, seeing her there, so dedicated, so present, hurt more than he expected. That woman was no longer the girl he had left. When the girls went back to playing, Valerie looked up. "Do you want to know everything I went through?" she finally asked. He nodded, but she didn't say a word. She just walked to the door and took the handle. "Come back tomorrow if you really want to talk, but come prepared to listen." It was a gentle but direct blow. She wasn't kicking him out, but she wasn't welcoming him either. It was an invitation, yes, but with conditions, and that made it clear who was in control now. Stephen left the shop with a heavier heart than when he entered. Her silence accompanied him, a reminder of everything he still didn't know. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the girls' faces or heard Valerie's serene tone. There were no screams or accusations, just truths kept in a deep place, and he felt deep down that he needed to go there, even if it hurt. Because sometimes, Silence speaks what we don't dare to say. A silent transformation. Stephen returned to my sanctuary the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. He always came in a light, unhurried way, without grand gestures. He didn't arrive with promises or try to force smiles. He just showed up and stayed. He helped sweep the floor, clean the dishes, and change the cat's water. Simple things, but things that were full of intention. At first, Valerie watched him from a distance. She wanted to see how far he would go, not with words, but with actions. Stephen didn't complain. He came early. He left when the tasks were done. He carried heavy boxes, packed products, and restocked the pet food. All in silence, like someone trying to learn a new language, the language of presence. The twins, little by little, began to notice him. Isabella, curious, approached more easily. She asked questions. She asked for help feeding a puppy. She laughed at the stories he told, with a certain exaggeration. Luna was slower. She stayed at a distance, watching. But she no longer looked away when he passed by. Stephen learned to recognize the small signs. A side smile, a shy hello, a drawing left on the counter. Every gesture was a step. He didn't know much about being a father, but he began to understand that being a father wasn't about knowing everything. It was about being there, day after day, even without guarantees. Some days were easier. On others, he felt like he was back at square one. But he didn't give up. He knew he had lost precious years. And now he wanted to do things differently. Not to compensate, because some things cannot be compensated for, but to build something new. For real. With time. With care. Valerie began to realize that he was no longer the hurried, timid man she had known. Stephen no longer talked about trips, numbers, or deals. Now he talked about the habits of a grumpy cat, or how Luna hid to draw in peace. He was paying attention, and that made all the difference. One day, without him expecting it, Isabella called him Uncle Stephen. The word sounded sweet, familiar, and it hurt a little too. It wasn't Dad, but it was a start. He smiled, knelt down, and thanked her as if he had received the greatest gift in the world, because for him, in that moment, he had. Over time, he began to truly know the girls. He discovered that Isabella was full of energy, a chatterbox who wanted to be a veterinarian. Luna, on the other hand, liked silence. She scribbled on the world with colored pencils, and sometimes said more with a single look than with entire sentences. Each one had her own unique universe, and he wanted to be part of them. Stephen started writing little stories about the animals in the shop, inventing adventures with characters that resembled the twins. Valerie found one of those texts on a crumpled sheet of paper near the cash register. She read it in silence, and for the first time, she felt her heart truly soften. Not out of nostalgia, but out of recognition. Because there was a man who once ran away and was now learning to stay. Not in a hurry, not with speeches, but with consistency. And perhaps, in the end, that was what mattered most. A family rebuilt. The transformation of Stephen didn't happen overnight. It came little by little, in the small details of daily life. One day, he held a newborn kitten in his hands and felt his heart squeeze in a strange way. It was too small, too fragile, too innocent. He had never noticed before. He always believed that sensitivity was a weakness, but in that instant, it was strength. On another afternoon, Isabella told him an invented story about a cat astronaut who lived on the moon and sent letters to a dog on Earth. Stephen listened to the whole thing, laughing at the absurd parts and praising the poorly drawn pictures. He never imagined that listening to a child could be so powerful. It was as if she saw him with clean, non-judgmental eyes. Luna took longer, but one day she left a drawing on the counter. It was a man sitting on the floor, surrounded by kittens and two girls. It was him. Stephen held the paper as if it were made of glass. He said nothing. He just put it in his pocket and took it home. He stared at that drawing for hours, like someone cherishing something sacred. Valerie watched everything with a mix of surprise and caution. She didn't give in easily, but she recognized the signs. Stephen was no longer a visitor. He was part of the routine. He cleaned cages, swept the sidewalk, organized shelves, and did everything with care. Not as an obligation, but as someone who truly wanted to be part of something bigger. He began to like the smell of the shop, the random conversations with customers, and the rough feel of the pet food bags. He felt that here he was finding something that money had never given him, a sense of belonging. In simple gestures, like bathing a frightened dog or feeding a sick cat, he recognized himself in a new way. Valerie gradually allowed small approximations. Lunch at home with the girls, a walk in the square on Sundays, a family board game. All with clear boundaries. But still, they were spaces that had once seemed impossible. And in those moments, Stephen didn't try to impress. He was just there, present, whole. One rainy morning, the twins got sick. Fever, coughs, sleepless nights. Stephen showed up with soup, blankets, and medicine. He waited outside, hoping Valerie would accept. And she did. For the first time, he helped take care of them. Not just to play, but to care. And that changed him more than any previous gesture. Over time, he learned to listen. Not just to the words, but to the silences. He knew when Luna needed space. He knew when Isabella needed to talk too much to hide some insecurity. And he also knew when Valerie was tired, even without her saying so. It was as if he was tuning his senses for the family that he was beginning to recognize as his own. The small miracles were in everything. In an unexpected hug, in a whispered, "Thank you," in a cup of coffee shared in silence. Things that would have gone unnoticed before, but now had the weight of revelations. Stephen understood more and more that loving is not about talking. It is about staying. It is about caring even when no one is watching. And in that daily life full of meows, laughter, and little hands, he finally discovered what it meant to be a father, not by title, but by presence, by dedication, by the transformation that happens when you stop thinking about yourself and start loving for real. A masterpiece of life. It was a normal afternoon, with the sun entering lazily through the shop's windows and the smell of pet food mixing with the sound of meows. The twins were playing with empty boxes, laughing at some invention of the moment. Stephen was nearby, tidying shelves, when he felt something different in his chest. A discomfort that wasn't pain. It was urgency. He looked at Valerie, who was folding rags on the counter, and then looked back at the girls. He felt there was a conversation he could no longer postpone. You couldn't continue building bonds without first facing your own absence. And in that moment, Stephen decided it was time to say what had never been said, with all the words, with all the faults. "Girls," he called them in a low but firm voice. They both turned at the same time. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" They approached with the lightness of those who don't carry a past. Stephen knelt on the floor, getting down to their eye level. Valerie stopped what she was doing and watched in silence. He took a deep breath. His heart was racing. The words came out slowly, as if they needed to get through years of silence. "I want to tell you something and apologize, for real." The girls exchanged a quick glance, curious. Luna held the hem of her dress. Isabella frowned. They waited. He continued, "When you were in your mom's tummy, I didn't stay. I left, and that was wrong. Very wrong. I was scared. I was selfish. And I left your mom alone at a time when she needed me most. And you? You grew up without knowing who I was, because I didn't know how to be a better person. Valerie pressed her lips together. She was standing still, but her heart was beating as if she were also on her knees there. Stephen continued, his eyes welling up. I can't go back in time. I can't change what I did. But I can say that I'm sorry. For real. And that I want to be here now, if you'll let me. Isabella was the first to speak. Her voice came out low, almost a whisper. Were you scared of us? Stephen swallowed. Yes, I was. But not because you didn't deserve me. It was because I didn't know how to be a better person. And running away seemed easier. Luna, who had remained silent until then, rested her head on her sister's shoulder. There were no immediate hugs, no pre-made phrases of forgiveness. But there, on that floor, in front of two girls and a woman who had held everything together alone, Stephen shed all his armor. For the first time, he showed his vulnerability without shame. It was just him asking for forgiveness, stripped of vanity, full of truth. Valerie slowly approached, knelt beside him, looked him in the eye, and said in a firm voice, They don't know everything you caused, but I do. And even so, I let you back in. Not out of weakness, but because they deserve the opportunity to know a father who is trying to do things right. And in that instant, without grand gestures, something new was born. A forgiveness yet to be named, a dedication under construction, and above all, the certainty that love, when it is sincere, begins precisely when you have the courage to show where it hurts. The circle closes. The days passed peacefully, but Valerie felt a strange weight approaching. Rumors began to circulate. A new company wanted to buy the land around the square, including the shop's location. The offer was generous, but it meant only one thing: the end of my sanctuary and everything it represented. Valerie received the news with a firm face, but a heavy heart. The shop wasn't just a business. It was her history, her roots, the home where she had raised her daughters and rebuilt herself from the ruins. Thinking about dismantling those shelves, taking the kittens out, was like turning off a living part of herself. But fighting against influential businessmen seemed impossible. When Stephen found out, he didn't react with empty words. He didn't say, "Everything will be okay." He didn't promise the world. He just listened, attentively, respectfully. That night, he didn't sleep. He paced the apartment, reviewing papers, making calls. He knew who was behind the project, and more than that, he knew he had influence there. The next morning, he went straight to a meeting with old partners, people he hadn't spoken to in a long time. Businessmen who only understood one language: profit. Stephen put something on the table that no one expected: his own share of a multi-million-dollar contract in exchange for a single condition: that the My Sanctuary location be excluded from the project. The board members laughed at first. They thought he was bluffing, but they soon realized he was serious. He would give up prestige, participation, and influence. Why? He asked. Because for the first time, he said, I understand what it is to have something that cannot be replaced by money. It was the most difficult meeting of his life, and also the most truthful. Valerie only found out days later. He didn't tell her. It was the landlord who showed up at the shop with a new contract and a smile on his face. Your place is guaranteed, Ms. Valerie. Someone very determined made this happen. She was surprised. She asked who, but the man only replied, someone who learned to value roots. She looked for Stephen that same afternoon. She found him sitting in the square, watching the girls play with a new puppy. When she asked him what he had done, he replied simply, I just did what I should have done from the beginning, taken care of what matters. She didn't say anything, but her look was deeper than any response. That night, Valerie closed the shop slowly. She ran her hands over the shelves, petted the kittens, looked at the drawing with the girls' scribbles, and cried. For the first time, not out of pain, but out of relief. She felt that, for the first time, someone had stayed. Not just for her, but for everything she had built with so much love. Stephen didn't save the shop out of heroism. He did it because he finally understood that caring isn't about showing up with flowers. It's about showing up when there's a fire. It's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes and truly offering what you have, even if it costs you dearly, even if no one sees it, because loving is acting. And in that silent gesture, he showed that he had changed. Time has a strange way of healing. It doesn't erase the pain, but it changes its color. What once burned only hurts slightly, and one day the pain becomes a memory. That's how it was with Valerie. She didn't forget what she had lived through. She didn't erase the absence, nor did she pretend she hadn't suffered. But little by little, the weight was transforming into space. Space to think, to feel, to perhaps forgive. She watched Stephen often, not out of distrust, but out of habit. Every gesture of his was a new chapter. He now knew how to fold the shop's towels, separate the pet food by type, and understood that Luna liked silence before bed. It wasn't perfection. It was effort. It was presence. And that, more than any word, moved her. One Sunday, the twins were lying on the shop floor, playing with the kittens, when Isabella suddenly asked, "Mommy, can Uncle Stephen have dinner with us tonight?" Valerie hesitated. She looked at him. He said nothing. He just waited. And in that small gesture of waiting, she felt something different, an old weariness leaving her. That night, they had dinner together for the first time in a long time. The table was simple, with rice, beans, vegetables, and juice. The girls chattered away, laughing and telling stories from school. Stephen listened with the calm gaze of someone who doesn't want to dominate the conversation, only to be a part of it. And Valerie, for the first time, didn't feel like running away. After the girls fell asleep, he offered to do the dishes. She didn't stop him. The two stood side by side, in silence, with the sound of water and gently clinking plates, until she said, "You've really changed." It was a simple phrase, but full of weight. He paused for a second, looked her in the eyes, and replied, "You taught me to change. I just didn't know you were teaching me." Valerie took a deep breath. She knew there were no guarantees. Loving someone who has hurt you requires a different kind of courage, a mature courage that knows trust is not blind surrender. It is a daily choice. And in that moment, she understood that moving forward was not about forgetting the past. It was about deciding that it would no longer rule her present. In the days that followed, she allowed small approaches, a walk to the market together, an afternoon reading with the girls, a note left on the door with a "Good morning," drawn by Stephen. Simple things that spoke louder than any grand declaration, because love, after being broken, is not rebuilt in a hurry. She knew there was a risk, there always is, but there was also a sincere desire to try, not out of nostalgia, but because she saw the transformation happening with her own eyes. Stephen was now a man who didn't run away, and for her, that was bigger than any gesture from the past. Valerie still carried scars, yes, but now she looked at them without pain, like marks of a difficult but overcome story. And there, among pet toys, washed dishes, and hands that no longer let go so easily, she realized that love wasn't perfect, but it was possible, even after everything. And in that silent yes she gave, deep in her heart there was no illusion. There was a choice. The choice to continue, to start over, and, who knows, to love again in a new, stronger, and truer way. That afternoon, the sun seemed gentler. The light entered through the windows of my sanctuary with a serene calm, warming the old tiled floor and the corners where the kittens slept peacefully. The twins ran through the shop with their hair loose, carrying baskets of toys. Valerie watched from a distance, smiling in silence, and by her side was Stephen, not as a visitor, but as part of the scene. He was holding a carton of milk and laughing at something Isabella had said. Luna, as always, moved more slowly, but now she took his hand naturally. There was no longer fear in her eyes, only trust. Stephen, who once feared not fitting in anywhere, now felt that he belonged, not out of obligation, but out of worthiness. Valerie swept the floor with light movements. Sometimes she was surprised to think about everything they had been through, everything they had endured. Now, looking around, she saw the result. A shop full of life, a good scent, and voices she loved. From time to time, her eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears, the kind that cleanse, not drown. My sanctuary was no longer just a pet shop. It was a space where stories crossed paths, where wounds healed in silence, and where love was not spoken of, but lived. An abandoned dog found a new home. A sick cat was cared for with affection. And in the midst of it all, a family that was once broken was remade. A new customer entered and commented, "This place has a different vibe. It feels like everything here has a soul." Valerie thanked them with a shy smile, while Stephen put more bags of food on the shelf. The girls sat down to draw, and without a word, they began to scribble the same scene. The shop, the cats, their mom, their dad, all together. In that moment, Stephen knelt beside them and looked at the drawing. His eyes glistened. He didn't need anything else. This was what he had always looked for and never found at parties, on trips, or in business. In the innocent strokes of two little girls, he understood that true love lives where you decide to stay. Valerie saw him there, kneeling, surrounded by his daughters, and felt something deep in her chest. It wasn't euphoria. It was peace. A peace that only comes when you accept the past, but choose to live in the present. She approached, took his hand, and said softly, "Thank you for not running away again." He squeezed her hand gently and replied, "Now I know this is where I want to be." At closing time, everyone helped. It was almost a ritual. The kittens were put in their corners, the lights were carefully turned off, and the bell on the door jingled like a happy farewell. Outside, the square still vibrated with the sounds of sunset, but inside, the heart of the story beat louder than ever. Before leaving, the twins ran to their parents and hugged them at the same time, a hug without warning, full of strength, laughter, and life. Valerie closed her eyes for an instant, as if to engrave that moment in her heart, and in that instant, she knew. Now, they had a family, not perfect, but whole. And so, my sanctuary came to shelter not only animals looking for a home, but also hearts that were once broken, and that, with time, patience, guys, and Labachina found their way back home. I invite you to share your opinion on this incredible story in the comments. If you liked it, share it, and subscribe to the channel to support our work. Another story is appearing on your screen that will probably also move you. Don't miss it.
Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever wondered how a single act of kindness could change someone's entire world? Today's story is a gentle reminder that love often finds us when we least expect it sometimes, through the hands of a stranger. Let's begin. The late afternoon sun stretched lazily across the rusty rooftops of a quiet suburban neighborhood. A soft breeze carried the gentle scent of freshly baked pastries from a small kitchen tucked behind a worn-out wooden house. Inside, Maya, a woman with kind eyes and a heart shaped by quiet sorrow, was carefully placing warm pastries into a woven basket. Outside, Eli, a cheerful 5-year-old boy, was playing with pebbles in the yard. Every few seconds, he'd shout, "Mom, are you done yet?" Few knew that Eli wasn't her biological son, but her nephew, the child of her younger sister who had died from a broken heart. One rainy afternoon, while Maya was packing up her stall, an elderly woman with a frail figure approached. Shivering, she asked, "Miss, could I have something to eat?" Without hesitation, Maya opened her basket and handed her a sweet potato pastry and a cup of warm tea. The old woman looked at her and smiled, her eyes filled with a strange, soothing warmth. After finishing the pastry and tea, the old woman gently wiped her mouth and smiled. "Thank you, dear. It's been a long time since someone treated me with such kindness." Maya shook her head. "I just did what anyone should. You don't have to thank me." The old woman hesitated before asking, "Do you live alone?" "No, I live with my son Eli," Maya said, nodding toward the house where the little boy was napping. "Actually, he's my nephew. His mother was my sister, but he's called me Mom since he could talk." The woman nodded thoughtfully. After a pause, she asked softly, "Would you mind if I stayed here for a few days? I have nowhere else to go." Maya blinked in surprise, but then offered a warm smile. "Of course. It's small, but it's warm. If you don't mind the space, you're welcome." "You're truly kind. My name is Gloria." "I'm Maya." They shook hands, as if something sacred had just passed between them. A week later, Gloria said, "Maya, I want to take you and little Eli to my real home." "You have a home?" Maya asked, shocked. "I left because I was furious with my ungrateful grandson. But now I want to return, and I want you and Eli to come with me." Moments later, a luxurious car pulled up outside Maya's house. Eli's eyes widened. "Mom, that car's so cool." On the way to the mansion, Gloria said, "I want to buy you both new clothes. I'll also take care of Eli's school fees. Don't say no, I just want to return the kindness you gave me." Maya was touched. But the real surprise came when they arrived. The door opened to reveal a tall, striking young man with a stern expression. He frowned at them. "Who are they?" "This is Maya and Eli. They'll be living with us from now on," Gloria replied. The man rolled his eyes. "Just what I need, more problems." On their first day at the mansion, Maya immediately felt the cold, judging stares from Chase, Gloria's grandson. It was clear he wasn't thrilled about her and Eli being there. "I knew it. They're only here for the money," Chase whispered to Gloria as Maya passed by. Maya heard him clearly but didn't react. She simply bowed her head slightly, squeezed Ellie's hand tighter, and kept walking. Later, Gloria invited all three to join her for dinner. The atmosphere was icy. Eli tried to break the silence. "Uncle, your watch is really cool." Chase glanced at him, then continued eating without a word. "Chase," Gloria scolded softly. He shrugged. "Not great with kids." Maya set her fork down. "If our presence is a bother, I can work in exchange for our stay. I didn't come here to freeload." Chase let out a cold chuckle. "Doing what? This isn't some hotel, you know." "I know. I just don't like feeling indebted," Maya replied calmly. In the days that followed, Maya woke early, cleaned the house, did the laundry, and cooked, all without being asked. She did it willingly. Gloria was pleased, but Chase remained aloof. One morning, as Maya was dusting a statue in the hall, Chase walked past, casting her a dismissive look. "Acting all noble, huh?" he muttered. Maya sighed but said nothing, continuing her work. That afternoon in the kitchen, she discovered the blender wasn't working. As she tried to fix it, Chase walked by. "Don't touch that, you'll just break it more," he said flatly. Maya stood up, hands on her hips. "I don't mess with things I don't know how to handle. And don't talk to me like I'm some useless maid." Chase blinked, caught off guard. "You've got some attitude." "Exactly, because I know I'm not wrong." Unbeknownst to them, Gloria was nearby, listening from behind the wall. She smiled to herself. It had been a long time since anyone dared to talk to Chase like that. Day by day, Eli grew more attached to Chase. Though distant at first, Chase began helping him with homework, taking him to the park, and slowly, unintentionally, warming up to Maya, though he'd never admit it. One evening, Gloria turned to Maya and said softly, "You're the first person who's ever made him listen. Don't give up." Maya simply smiled, but her heart had already begun to stir. As time passed, the atmosphere in the house began to shift. Chase wasn't as grumpy as before. Though he still tossed out sarcastic comments, the way he looked at Maya had changed. He started noticing the little things, the quiet way she washed dishes, how she sang Eli to sleep, and the smile he once called fake now made his heart skip a beat. Eli grew more attached to Chase with each day. One morning, he ran up with a messy crayon drawing and handed it to Chase. "Uncle Chase, this is you, Mom, and me, your dad." Chase froze. "Dad?" Maya overheard and quickly stepped in. "Eli, don't call him that." "But he's like a dad. He takes me to school, plays with me, like my friends' dads." Eli pouted. Maya glanced at Chase, bracing for a bad reaction, but Chase just patted Eli's head. "Call me whatever makes you happy, little man." That evening, as Maya folded laundry in her room, Chase walked in, visibly unsure. I'm not good with kids, but with Eli, I want to be better." Maya looked up, surprised to see such honesty in his eyes. The next day was family day at Eli's school. Maya hadn't planned to go, afraid of drawing attention, but Chase had already bought matching t-shirts for all three of them. The shirts read, "Mom, Dad, Eli," in soft pastel letters. "You're coming?" Maya asked, eyes wide. "Yeah, someone has to hold his hand while he runs, right?" Chase grinned. At school, they drew stares of admiration from other parents. Eli beamed with joy. In one quiet moment, Maya watched Chase playing with Eli and felt her chest tighten in the most unfamiliar but comforting way. Amid the noise, Maya quietly wiped her tears. No one noticed, except Chase. He walked over and said gently, "Don't cry. Today's a happy day." Maya smiled faintly. "I don't even know why I'm crying. Maybe it's the first time I've seen Eli smile like that." Chase looked at her for a long moment. "You might not realize it, but you're changing everything, even me." Maya's heart pounded. She couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. Chase tilted his head and gave a soft smile. "I think I'm starting to want to keep this picture forever." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying the image of Chase carrying Eli after the family day race. The way he hugged the boy and said, "You're the biggest winner in Mom and Dad's hearts," made her heart ache in the best way. She stepped out to the balcony for some air, emotions still tangled inside her. To her surprise, Chase was already there, leaning quietly against the railing, eyes fixed on the starlit sky. "Can't sleep?" he asked, not turning around. "No," Maya replied softly. "You too?" "Yeah, my mind's all over the place." "About Eli, about you," he admitted, his voice low and warm. It made her chest tighten. Maya smiled faintly and took a seat beside him. They sat in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Eventually Chase spoke again. "Did you know that today was the first time I felt like I truly had a family?" She turned to look at him. In the dim glow of the night, she could see the honesty in his eyes. "I used to think I wasn't cut out for kids or commitment, but Eli and you changed that." Maya looked down, heart pounding. "You make me want to be a better man, Maya. Not because I have to, but because I want to." He stood, walked over and asked, "Can I kiss you?" She didn't answer. She simply stood and looked up at him. The kiss came soft, tentative, but filled with all the emotion they'd both held back for so long. They were no longer strangers, no longer opponents. In that moment, Maya knew she loved him. After the kiss, she rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Eli isn't my biological son. He's my sister's. She passed away after finding out the man she loved already had a wife and kids." Chase tightened his hold, his voice rough. "You did what few would dare. You raised him with love, like your own. I'm proud of you." Tears slipped down Maya's cheek, not from pain, but from being seen. Chase stepped back, took her hands. "Let me do the rest. Let me be a part of this family, officially." His eyes pleaded, "Marry me, Maya." She smiled through her tears and nodded. Yes. They embraced on the balcony under the quiet night sky, as if the universe itself had stopped to witness the beginning of a deep, once-in-a-lifetime love. After the proposal, Maya felt like she was dreaming. Her heart still trembled as she looked into Chase's sincere eyes. She had grown used to hardship, to being a mother on her own, but in that moment, when he gripped her hands and said, "We're already a family," every wall she had built quietly crumbled. The wedding was simple, held in the small garden behind the mansion. No extravagant flowers, no lavish banquet, just their loved ones, the soft, golden sunset, and Eli, beaming in his tiny suit, thrilled to finally share the same last name as Mom and Dad. From a distance, Gloria sat beneath an old tree, eyes misty as she watched her grandson hold the hand of the woman he once dismissed. She folded her hands together, whispering, "Thank you, God. He's finally grown up, finally learned to love beyond himself." When Maya approached and knelt to thank her, Gloria pulled her into a firm embrace. "You are the best thing that's ever happened to him. Thank you, Maya." From that day forward, life began a new chapter. Chase had truly changed, no longer the reckless boy he once was. Each morning he made Maya coffee and tied Eli's shoes. Each night he read bedtime stories, listened to school tales, and held Maya like she was his greatest treasure. Maya no longer feared love. She opened a small bakery, each pastry carrying a piece of her heart. Every afternoon when she saw Chase and Eli walk into the shop, she knew she was living the life she once only dared to dream. One evening, while they were watching cartoons, Eli whispered, "Mom, Dad, you're what I always wished for, and now I have you." Gloria stood quietly at the door, eyes glistening as she watched the three of them. At last, this family is whole. The news of Maya's pregnancy came one morning when she felt a little dizzy and nauseous. Chase immediately scooped her up, half panicked, half determined. "We're going to the hospital, no arguments." After the checkup, the doctor smiled. "Congratulations, you're 8 weeks along." Chase nearly jumped from his seat, hugging Maya tightly, his eyes wet with emotion. "We're going to have another little angel." From that moment on, Chase transformed completely. He turned down business trips, shortened his hours, and barely left Maya's side. He soothed every mood swing, tracked every craving, and even learned to cook beetroot soup just because she once said she liked the smell. As for Eli, he couldn't be more excited. Every day he drew pictures of Mom with a big belly and talked to the baby as if she could hear him. "Hi, baby sister. I'm Eli. I'm your big brother, okay? Mom said you're a girl." The birth came earlier than expected. Maya doubled over with pain in the middle of the night. Chase scrambled around the house searching for the car keys. Gloria called the hospital, and Eli cried in fear, afraid his mom was hurting. Chase held Maya's hand the whole ride, whispering words of comfort. When the baby's first cry rang out, he broke down, covering his face with his hand, then kissed Maya's forehead again and again. "You did it. She's here." Their baby girl was named Jasmine, after Maya's favorite flower. Weeks later, the once quiet home was now filled with baby giggles, tiny cries, and happy conversations. Gloria often sat holding baby Jasmine while Eli whispered to his sister, "Don't cry, I'm your big brother now." Maya looked at the three in front of her, husband, son, and daughter, and felt her heart overflow. She once believed life had only given her loss, But sometimes, happiness arrives through something as small as giving a stranger a pastry on a rainy afternoon. Gloria sat by the window, knitting peacefully, her eyes glowing with quiet joy. Watching her grandson, once so lost, now holding a family in his arms, filled her heart with peace. "Everything's finally where it's meant to be," she whispered to herself, as if closing a chapter she'd long waited to finish. Maya rested her head on Chase's shoulder. He wrapped one arm around her, the other supporting their sleeping daughter on his chest. And softly she whispered, "Sometimes it takes a stranger's kindness to change your whole world." If this story touched you, even just a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need this warmth today, and subscribe to Noah's Stories for more heart-healing tales. We'd love to know, has someone's unexpected kindness ever changed your life? Or maybe you were that light for someone else? Let's share those stories in the comments below. This community is built on love, hope, and real moments like these. And if today's story made you smile, cry, or believe in love a little more, just wait until the next one. Until then, keep your heart open, because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can lead to the greatest kind of forever. Thank you for being here, lovely soul. See you in the next chapter. Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever met someone who completely changed the way you see the world? Someone whose very presence opened a door you didn't even realize was there? Today, I'll tell you a story about bold dreams, quiet strength, and a love that blossomed in the heart of bustling Chicago. The golden light of dusk spilled across the proud skyscrapers of downtown. On the 38th floor of a gleaming glass tower, Julian Hayes, the creative director of one of the city's leading urban design firms, stood silently before the massive window, his gaze drifting out toward the winding river beyond. At 38, Julian had everything most people dream of: a brilliant career, a name that carried weight, and a charisma that turned heads wherever he went. Yet at this very moment, he felt a quiet hollowness settle deep inside, a sense that no matter how grand the projects were, something vital was still missing. And it was precisely then that fate decided to send her into his life. That fleeting moment, Julian standing in silence before the window, the river stretching quietly in the distance, lasted only seconds, but its echo lingered, carried with him into the next meeting. He turned back to the long conference table, now cluttered with sketches and models, all precise, polished, and lifeless. Julian sifted through the pages, sharp lines, perfect ratios, calculated forms. But none of it spoke to the soul. It felt like looking into a polished shell, glossy on the outside, but hollow within. This wasn't just another project on their portfolio. This was meant to be a landmark, a space to live, work, and connect in the heart of South Loop. The city was evolving, and this building was supposed to help tell its story. But what lay before him looked like a geometry exercise wrapped in expensive glass. Julian sighed, his gaze heavy. "We can't keep going like this," he said quietly but firmly. "I don't want something people walk past. I want something that makes them stop." The room fell silent. 4 firms had already been dismissed. Deadlines were slipping. The city board was growing impatient. But Julian refused to rush a vision that didn't feel right. "Is there anyone else?" he asked, turning to his assistant. "Find someone who dares to think differently, even if they're not on the list. Even if we've never worked with them before." Because if this building was truly going to live, it needed a heart. 3 days later, she walked in. Elena Cruz. Not with the flashy confidence typical of high-stakes design pitches. No designer dress, no luxury heels, just a crisp cream suit, her long dark hair tied neatly back, and a gaze that met the room with calm steadiness. Not arrogant, but certainly not afraid. The room was filled with silk ties, luxury watches, and sharp glances. But Elena stood out precisely because she wasn't trying to. There was nothing performative about her. She simply was. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice warm and composed. "I'm Elena Cruz. Apologies for being late. South Chicago traffic at this hour is something else." Julian looked up, and for a fleeting moment, something in him paused. A flicker of curiosity, maybe admiration, or something deeper, not yet named. Without waiting for permission, Elena placed her leather bag on the table, pulling out a neatly bound portfolio and 3 small models. She laid them down with quiet care, as if she was offering not just an idea, but a piece of herself. "I've studied the South Loop site thoroughly," she began, her voice steady, though her eyes sparkled with quiet fire. "Most buildings there are modern, sharp angles, glass and steel. Beautiful, yes, but cold. They don't feel..." She flipped open her drawings. 3 interconnected structures linked by open courtyards, inspired by Spanish colonial forms and the terracotta rooftops of southern neighborhoods. Curved balconies, hand-forted brick walls, and shared green spaces made it feel warm, grounded, alive. This design isn't about form. It's about memory, about culture, about giving people a place to feel like they belong. Then she paused and looked directly at Julian. "To me, architecture doesn't begin with a blueprint, it begins with emotion." Julian said nothing. He had sat through dozens of presentations over the years, brilliant, technical, polished, but none had ever felt quite this honest. In the days that followed the presentation, Julian and Elena found themselves working together almost daily. At first, everything remained strictly professional, fine-tuning technical details, reviewing material samples, crunching costs. But slowly, the meeting stretched longer, not because of inefficiency, but because neither seemed eager to leave. Julian, known for his precision and pragmatism, focused fiercely on numbers and deadlines. Elena, with an artist's heart, kept returning the conversation to experience, to how spaces made people feel. Their differences sparked more than a few heated debates, real debates, unfiltered, passionate. But somewhere between the arguments and the occasional bursts of laughter, a deeper understanding began to grow. One late afternoon, after a long and exhausting site visit, Julian suggested, "How about a walk? There's something I want to show you." Elena hesitated, then nodded. They left the bustling center and wandered down narrow South Chicago streets. The autumn sky was deep and brooding, bare trees casting long shadows across the sidewalks. They didn't talk much, just walked side by side, their footsteps syncing with the quiet pulse of the city. Eventually, they stopped in front of a small cafe, its windows fogged over, warm light spilling onto the street. Julian smiled. "This place? It was part of my childhood." Inside, sitting across from each other with steaming mugs in hand, Julian asked, "Why architecture?" Elena paused, her gaze drifting toward the misty window, watching golden leaves dance in the wind. "When I was little, I used to follow my father to construction sites," she said quietly. "To me, a brick or a plank of wood wasn't just material. It was the beginning of a story." Then she lifted her eyes to meet his. "I learned to imagine homes before they were built. Who would live there, laugh there, love there? And I realized, architecture isn't just a profession, it's a promise." Julian said nothing. In that moment, Elena was no longer just the architect he'd hired. She was the woman quietly challenging everything he thought he knew, with a sincerity that needed no grand words. And deep inside Julian, something began to shift. A week later, Elena received a phone call. She quietly stepped out of the meeting room, and when she returned, something in her eyes had changed. Softer. Worried. "My dad's sick," she said softly, almost in a whisper when they were alone. "I need to go home for a while." Julian didn't hesitate. "I'll come with you." Elena blinked, slightly surprised, but didn't argue. There was something in his gaze, steady, unspoken, that made no impossible to say. 2 days later, they boarded a flight to a small town near the Texas border where Elena had grown up. No skyscrapers, no city lights, just dusty red roads, low rooftops, and the hum of wind passing through cornfields. Her mother, Lucia, greeted them with a warm hug and a smile as gentle as morning sun. "You must be Julian," she said. "Elena's written about you." Julian chuckled awkwardly, barely getting a word in before being ushered into the kitchen and handed a plate of steaming tamales and homemade cinnamon tea. Everything was so warm, so real, as if he wasn't a guest but a son returning home. That afternoon, he met Mr. Cruz, Elena's father. Though clearly tired, he made the effort to sit up and talk, and somehow these two very different men quickly found common ground in stories of work, craftsmanship, and seeing life through every brick and board. Elena watched from the hallway as her father smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in weeks, and her heart eased. The days passed quickly. Julian woke to roosters crowing, drank coffee from heavy brown mugs, and slowly melted into the rhythm of life there. Neighbors called him the future son-in-law, and kids dragged him outside to draw chalk murals on the patio. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Julian sat alone on the porch, gazing up at the star-filled sky, a sight he rarely saw in the city. The breeze was gentle, carrying the scent of earth and dry wood. He closed his eyes for a moment, then looked out into the night. "You belong here," he whispered, as if speaking to Elena though she wasn't near. "And I can't imagine this life without you anymore." That night, for the first time in his life, Julian knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was going to marry her. After spending a few days in Elena's hometown, Julian returned to Chicago, but something within him had shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle, quiet, like the way autumn slowly paints the trees gold without asking for attention. Elena returned to the city a week later. They saw each other at the office again, the same blueprints, the same numbers, but neither mentioned the trip. They didn't have to. Everything was different now. The way they looked at each other, the quiet between them, even their breathing seemed somehow synced. One crisp weekend afternoon, Julian called her. "Are you free? There's a place I want to show you." They met at the entrance of the Riverside Park, once an abandoned rail line, now a tree-lined walkway. The autumn air was cool and soft, leaves drifting gently across the old brick path. They walked in silence, side by side. Julian led her to a quiet open plot near the main project, an expansion site he hadn't shown anyone. There he stopped and turned to her. "Elena," he began, voice low and measured. "At first this project was just work, but since you came into my life, it's become something else. You've made me see the world differently." She didn't respond right away, only met his eyes, steady and calm, as though she'd been waiting for him to say this. "I know we come from different worlds. You're the warmth of open skies and front porches. I'm glass towers and deadlines. But when I'm with you, I don't feel the distance. I just want to be closer." He stepped toward her slowly, slow enough for her to move back if she wanted to, but she didn't. She didn't blink. And when their lips met, it wasn't impulsive or rushed. It was a quiet confirmation that love had begun, unplanned, but right on time. After that afternoon, everything between them remained quiet. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just the soft, certain rhythm of two people falling in love gently, like hearts that had long known each other, now finally speaking the same language. Elena was still the architect whose eyes lit up when talking about terracotta and sunlight courtyards. Julian remained the man of timelines and technicalities. But together they moved in harmony, like the most balanced design, needing no revisions. The project was completed on schedule. Earth-toned buildings stood gracefully connected by sun-drenched courtyards. Curved balconies whispered of Spanish heritage, and stone walkways invited people home. Residents began to move in, and the press praised Elena's design as a voice of community in the heart of a steel metropolis. At the grand opening, Julian stepped up to the podium. Under the flash of cameras and the echo of applause, he smiled and took Elena's hand. "We're calling it Casa Nueva," he announced. "It means new home, not just concrete and glass, but a space to begin again, to belong and to love." The audience stood and clapped. Elena's hand slipped into his, not with trembling, not with pressure, but with a stillness that said, "I'm here, and I choose you." A few weeks later, on a quiet, windless autumn afternoon, Julian brought Elena to a wildflower field tucked behind the development, the same spot she once said was most beautiful when no blueprints got in the way. She didn't know what he carried in his coat, only that he kept looking at her, not nervous, just deeply present. "Elena," he said, "I don't know how many plans will change in the years to come, but one thing I don't want to redesign is you in my life." Then he knelt and pulled out a deep blue velvet box. "Will you be my wife?" She didn't answer right away. She simply stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll always be your home." Their wedding came a few months later, held in a small rooftop garden above Casa Nueva, where bougainvillea vines danced in the breeze. No fancy wine, no extravagant dress, just close family and the sound of honest laughter. Julian's mother hugged Elena tight, eyes shining. Elena's father stood quietly beside her, not saying much, just holding her hand, long and steady. There was no need for a grand hall, because that day, love had already received every blessing it ever needed. After their simple but joy-filled wedding, Julian brought Elena back to his penthouse, a space where the city lights stretched endlessly across the skyline and silence was intimate, not empty. After their intimate wedding on the rooftop of Casa Nuevo, Julian brought Elena back to his private penthouse, with floor-to-ceiling windows and the city lights flickering outside like 1,000 silent blessings. They didn't say much as they entered. Elena unclipped her hair, Julian gently placed the bridal bouquet on the table. The air in the elegant space was calm, almost sacred, like the final breath of a long, beautiful day. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clutching the soft fabric of her dress. Julian approached, ready to speak, but stopped when he caught the hesitation in her eyes. She took a deep breath. "Julian," she began, barely audible, I've never done this before." Julian froze. Silence lingered for a beat. He looked at her, not with doubt, but with genuine surprise. Then slowly his expression softened. "Are you serious?" he asked gently. Elena nodded, her eyes steady but her heartbeat racing loud in her chest. Julian sat beside her, quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, a warm, grateful smile. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said. "It makes you even more special." He didn't rush. He didn't reach for her right away. He brushed her hair back softly and kissed her forehead, as if guarding something precious. When they lay down together, not rushed, not scripted, just two hearts learning how to meet for the first time. Every breath, every touch, was as gentle as a flower unfolding in the quiet of night. It wasn't a night of wild passion or grand displays. It was a night lit by love, pure, reverent, and exactly on time. And as they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, the wind through the window seemed to lull them into a new chapter, one of things never touched before, now finally beginning. 3 years had passed since they stood hand in hand in that rooftop garden. Now they lived somewhere else, closer to their roots, their memories, and the people who shaped them. Julian and Elena had moved to the small town where she grew up, just a few blocks from her parents' house. No skyscrapers, no bright city lights, just a quiet corner of the world where mornings began with roosters and evenings smelled of rain on soil and wood. The home they lived in was designed by Elena herself, not large but flooded with light. Around it she planted all her favorite flowers, purple bougainvillea by the porch, lavender along the fence, and a patch of white daisies beneath the window where she often sat to draw. Within that home there was a constant sound, the laughter of Lucia, their 2-year-old daughter, with soft curls like clouds and wide brown eyes just like her mother's. Lucia loved to dig in the dirt, doodle on anything she could find, and hum little songs whenever it rained. One quiet, rainy morning, Julian sat on a rattan chair by the window, a mug of steaming coffee in hand. Elena was tying Lucia's hair, both of them laughing softly under the warm light of the kitchen. He said nothing, just watched them for a long, still moment. And then, his mind drifted back to that crisp morning when she first walked into his boardroom, with steady eyes, a quiet voice, and a courage that spoke louder than any pitch. She didn't just present a design, she changed the course of his life. This is the masterpiece, he thought. Not the building, not the accolades, but this little house, that woman, this child, a life, not perfect, but full. And to Julian, that was the most beautiful thing of all. Thank you so much for staying with Julian and Elena until the very end. If this story touched something in you, even just a little, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, what does your own masterpiece look like? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Until next time, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter. At just 32 years old, Max Carter was the epitome of success. As the founder and CEO of a revolutionary AI technology company, he had built an empire that not only disrupted industries, but also made him one of the youngest billionaires in the world. However, despite his dazzling career and lavish lifestyle, Max's personal life was far from fulfilling. For years, he had poured all his energy into his work, neglecting the idea of finding love. He wasn't short on admirers. His wealth and intelligence drew attention wherever he went. But Max's sharp mind and high standards made him a difficult match. He hated superficial relationships, and his strong personality often intimidated others. Max's closest friend, Ryan, often teased him about his elusive love life. "You've conquered the tech world, Max, but you're hopeless at dating," Ryan joked during one of their usual dinners. Determined to help, Ryan persuaded Max to give dating apps a try. "It's time to get out of your comfort zone," he said, downloading an app onto Max's phone before he could protest. With some reluctance, Max decided to go along with the idea. "Who knows," he thought, "maybe I'll find someone who doesn't just see me as a billionaire." And so, Max embarked on a journey into the unpredictable world of online dating, completely unaware of the twists and turns it would bring to his already complex life. Max's journey into online dating started with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He meticulously crafted his profile, choosing photos that showcased his love for innovation and adventure, along with a brief description of himself that hinted at his witty humor. Within hours, matches began pouring in, and Max felt a flicker of hope. First date, Sophie. His first match was Sophie, an accomplished journalist. Her profile radiated confidence, and Max admired her sharp mind during their initial chats. They arranged to meet at a trendy cafe downtown. When Sophie arrived, she was every bit as poised as he had imagined. The conversation flowed easily, until a stray dog wandered close to their table. Sophie froze, her eyes wide with terror. Is that a dog?" she stammered, inching her chair away. Before Max could respond, Sophie bolted, leaving him sitting alone with his untouched cappuccino. The second date, Clara determined not to let one bad experience deter him. Max set up another date. This time, he met Clara, a financial analyst with an impressive background. The evening started well, with Clara asking insightful questions about his work. But as the conversation progressed, her tone shifted. Have you ever considered what would happen to your assets if you were in an accident? Clara asked, her eyes narrowing. Max blinked, caught off guard. I mean, do you have contingency plans in place? She continued, launching into an unsolicited financial consultation. By the end of the night, Max felt as though he'd been grilled in a boardroom rather than on a date. The fallout after 2 disastrous encounters, Max grew disillusioned with the app. Maybe this isn't for me, he muttered, deleting it from his phone. He confided in Ryan about his frustrations. Dating feels more like a circus than a connection, he said, shaking his head. But Ryan, ever the optimist, wasn't ready to let Max give up. You just haven't met the right person yet, he said with a grin. Little did Max know, the right person wasn't far away, though their first meeting would be anything but ideal. On the morning of December 24th, Max was gearing up for a much-needed holiday break. For once, he planned to step away from his tech empire and spend Christmas at his family's estate in the countryside. His bags were packed, and his sleek black sports car gleamed in the winter sunlight as he pulled out of his driveway. The streets were bustling with holiday activity, cars honking, shoppers rushing, and snow falling lightly. Max navigated through the chaos with practiced ease until he reached a crowded intersection. That's when it happened. A pickup truck barreled through a stop sign and crashed into the back of Max's car with a deafening crunch. His head jerked forward, and for a moment, all he could hear was the ringing in his ears. You've got to be kidding me, Max groaned, stepping out to assess the damage. The pickup's driver scrambled out, her face pale with shock. She was a petite woman in her late 20s, her hands trembling as she clutched the steering wheel for balance. I'm so sorry, she stammered. I was distracted. I didn't see. The stop sighed. Max's frustration boiled over as he took in the wreckage of his car. Distracted? Do you have any idea what you've done? He snapped. This car is a one-of-a-kind model. The woman introduced herself as Emma, a local art teacher. Her voice remained calm despite Max's anger. I'll take full responsibility, she said sincerely. I'll pay for the repairs, and I know a great shop that can handle it. Max sighed, his initial fury giving way to exhaustion. Fine. Let's exchange information, he muttered. Emma handed him a card with her number, and they parted ways. But as Max drove his battered car to his mechanic, he couldn't shake the feeling that this chaotic encounter was just the beginning of something unusual. Later that day, Max's mood worsened when his mechanic delivered the bad news. His car wouldn't be ready for weeks. To top it off, he received an email from his assistant. His delayed schedule meant he'd now be working through the holidays. Max grumbled, blaming Emma for ruining his plans. By the evening of December 24th, Max's frustration had reached its peak. He couldn't stop replaying the accident in his mind, blaming Emma for the chain of events that ruined his plans. The thought of spending Christmas alone in his penthouse filled him with dread. Just as he considered ignoring the holiday altogether, his phone buzzed with a call from Ryan. Max, I have a surprise for you, Ryan said cheerfully. Please don't tell me it's another blind date, Max groaned. Exactly, Ryan replied, unfazed by Max's sarcasm. Just trust me. You'll thank me later. Here's the address. Be there at 7 p.m. With little else to do and a faint sense of obligation to his friend, Max reluctantly agreed. When he arrived at the address, Max found himself in front of a small, cozy community center. The soft glow of Christmas lights framed the entrance, and he could hear the faint sounds of laughter and bustling activity from inside. As he stepped through the door, his eyes widened in surprise. Standing near a long table covered with trays of food was Emma, the very same woman who had crashed into his car. She was tying an apron around her waist, surrounded by volunteers who were decorating the space and preparing dishes. Emma's face lit up when she saw him. Max, what are you doing here? She asked, equally surprised. I could ask you the same thing, Max replied. Ryan said I'd be meeting someone here. I didn't expect it to be you. Emma smiled sheepishly. Well, this is awkward. Ryan's my cousin. He must have thought this was a good idea. She gestured toward the busy volunteers. I'm organizing a Christmas dinner for kids from the local foster homes. We're cooking everything from scratch, so there's still a lot to do. Max hesitated, his instinct telling him to turn around and leave, but something about Emma's determined smile stopped him. Before he could think of an excuse, Emma handed him an apron and grinned. You're here now, so you might as well help. Unless you'd rather stand there looking awkward. Before he could protest, Max found himself chopping vegetables and arranging trays of food. As the evening progressed, he started to notice something different about Emma. Her warmth, her passion for helping others, and her natural way of bringing people together began to chip away at his usual guarded demeanor. For the first time in years, Max felt a strange sense of belonging. The kitchen was alive with activity, pots clattering, laughter echoing, and the mouth-watering aroma of freshly baked dishes filling the air. Max worked alongside Emma and the volunteers, initially feeling out of place, but gradually finding his rhythm. As they prepared the final trays of food, Emma explained her passion for this event. I've been doing this for years, she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. These kids deserve to experience the joy of Christmas, even if they don't have families to celebrate with. It's my favorite tradition. Max listened quietly, impressed by her dedication. He had spent his life solving global problems with technology, but here was Emma, creating profound change on a personal level. When the food was ready, the team loaded the trays into a van and drove to the community hall where the dinner would be held. Max's curiosity grew as they arrived. The hall was transformed into a winter wonderland, with twinkling lights overhead, wreaths adorned with red ribbons, and tables set with festive decorations. Children of all ages were already there, their faces lighting up as the food arrived. Emma took charge, coordinating the volunteers with calm efficiency. Max followed her lead, serving steaming plates of roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, and colorful salads. As the evening unfolded, Max observed Emma closely. She moved through the room with ease, comforting shy children, laughing with others, and even crouching down to clean up a spill without hesitation. Her warmth was contagious, and Max felt a sense of admiration he hadn't expected. At one point, a little boy tugged on Max's sleeve. "Are you Santa's helper?" the boy asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Max chuckled, kneeling down to his level. "Not exactly, but I'm here to make sure you have the best Christmas dinner ever." The boy grinned, giving Max a high five before running off to join his friends. For the first time in years, Max felt a joy that wasn't tied to success or money. It was simple, pure, and deeply fulfilling. As the night wound down, Max and Emma sat together, watching the children enjoy dessert. "I have to admit," Max said, turning to Emma, "I didn't think tonight would turn out like this. You've created something truly special here." Emma smiled softly. "It's not about perfection, Max. It's about sharing what we can and making the most of what we have." Max nodded, feeling a shift within himself. What started as a ruined Christmas had transformed into one of the most meaningful nights of his life. As the evening came to an end, Max helped Emma pack up the remaining food and decorations. Despite the exhaustion from hours of work, he felt energized by the warmth and joy that had filled the room. Emma walked him to his car, her breath visible in the crisp winter air. "Thanks for helping tonight," she said, her voice soft. "I wasn't sure how you'd feel about all this, but you really made a difference." Max leaned against his car and smiled. "I think I should be thanking you. I came here expecting another awkward setup, but this turned out to be incredible." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the quiet hum of the city surrounding them. Finally, Max broke the silence. "Emma, would you like to have dinner sometime? A real one? Without aprons? Or a room full of kids?" Emma laughed, her cheeks turning pink. "I'd like that," she said. As Max drove home that night, his thoughts lingered on Emma and the magic of the evening. For the first time in years, he felt a connection that wasn't tied to status or expectations, just something real. It seemed Christmas had delivered a gift he never expected. In the days following Christmas, Max found himself thinking about Emma constantly. Their conversations replayed in his mind, and he couldn't help but smile at the thought of her passion and kindness. For a man used to the fast-pacing world of tech deals and corporate acquisitions, Emma's simple yet profound way of viewing the world was refreshing. It wasn't long before Max reached out to her. Their first official date, a quiet dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant, was a far cry from the high prefaces of the events Max usually attended, but for the first time, he didn't feel the need to impress. Emma's easygoing nature and genuine interest in his life made Max feel at ease. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. Max began to open up about his fears and doubts, things he had never shared with anyone before. Emma, in turn, showed him the joys of slowing down and appreciating life's simple pleasures. One evening in February, as they sat on the couch surrounded by takeout boxes and laughing over a silly TV show, Max turned to Emma with a spark in his eyes. "What if we made the Christmas dinner an even bigger event next year?" he suggested. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Bigger? How so?" "We could turn it into something extraordinary. My company could sponsor it. We'd bring in more volunteers, more food, and create an unforgettable experience for even more kids," Max explained. Emma's face lit up with excitement, but she added with a playful grin, "Only if you promise to keep wearing that apron." The idea quickly took shape. Over the months, Max and Emma worked hand in hand, combining his resources with her grassroots approach to make the event a reality. By the time the next Christmas rolled around, their dinner had grown into a grand celebration, with hundreds of children enjoying a magical night filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Through it all, Max discovered something he hadn't expected. The more he gave, the more fulfilled he felt. The Christmas dinner became not just an annual event, but a symbol of what truly mattered: connection, compassion, and the power of giving back. That first Christmas with Emma had turned his life upside down in the best way possible. What began as a chaotic accident led to a partnership that redefined not just how Max saw love, but also how he saw life itself. Each year since, their Christmas tradition grew richer with meaning, becoming a celebration of not just generosity, but of the joy found in unexpected connections.